Chapter 1592. Back then, when you met Yi Qing. No, when you met Zhe Tianjiandi, tell me in detail. What exactly happened to Zhe Tianjiandi? Is she really a woman? Guhan tried his best to sound calm as he asked. Guhan felt that this was the only way he could find out what happened to his wife, Yi Qing. Moreover, it was from her own daughter. I knew father was interested in Zhe Tianjiandi. But father, how did you know that Zhe Tianjiandi was a woman? I thought only my daughter knew this secret. Jiyu Xuanwu said excitedly. Don't forget, the sword in father's hand is the heavenly sword. It was the heavenly sword that told father all this. Guhan immediately put the blame on the heavenly sword. Before Jiyu Xuanwu left him, Guhan had never told Jiyu Xuanwu about Zhe Tianjiandi, so Jiyu Xuanwu always thought that Guhan didn't know Zhe Tianjiandi's true gender. Oh, so that's how it is. However, Sister Yi Qing doesn't have a good relationship with the heavenly sword. She forcefully kept the heavenly sword in its scabbard and didn't let her out. Moreover, she was trapped for months at a time. I reckon that the heavenly sword hates Sister Yi Qing a lot. Jiyu Xuanwu sighed, then slowly began to narrate. Actually, I don't know much about Sister Yi Qing, because she was never willing to talk about herself. I could only piece together a rough story through some trivial chatter. There might be some big mistakes in it, so father, please don't take everything seriously. After all, I don't know if Sister Yi Qing is telling the truth or not. Sister Yi Qing said that when she was about to become an adult, she had a serious illness. Although she was lucky enough to survive, her brain was damaged, so she forgot everything that happened more than 10 years ago. When she regained her memory, she was already an 18-year-old adult. She was born in the Zongzi tribe near Yuzhong City. Sister Yi Qing's father left the tribe when she was very young. It was said that he met a passing swordsman and found that her father was very talented, so he brought her back to Yangjing City for training. Speaking of which, this woman is actually the 6th-generation successor of the Liu Nian family, as well as my 7th-generation granddaughter and your 8th-generation granddaughter. This is simply too embarrassing. Later, it was said that Sister Yi Qing's father fell in love with my granddaughter. However, my granddaughter had a very serious illness and was diagnosed that she would never be able to bear a child. So, Sister Yi Qing's father thought of the daughter he had abandoned in the Zongzi tribe and brought Sister Yi Qing back to the Liu Nian clan, which is also my home. It's just that Sister Yi Qing's father is a demented demon. In order to hide the mistakes he made, as well as Sister Yi Qing's true identity and gender, he actually killed the entire Zongzi tribe on the night he took Sister Yi Qing away. You should know that the Zongzi tribe is passed down through blood relations. Everyone in the tribe is Sister Yi Qing's blood relative, but in the end, they were all killed without hesitation. Later on, this man even killed some Yuan Ku and stole a medicine that could rejuvenate a person's body. He also used some evil methods to change Sister Yi Qing's gender to a male. Then, he pretended to be a 5 or 6-year-old survivor that he picked up from the Zongzi tribe, intending to raise him as their adopted son. Father, your 8th-generation granddaughter is just too innocent. She never thought that there would be so many conspiracies. She really raised Sister Yi Qing as her adopted son. However, she's still your 7th-generation grandson. My 6th-generation grandson still has some brains. He sensed that this child's background is a little abnormal, so he refused to admit that this child is the successor of the Liu Nian clan. He planned to work hard to give birth to a son so that you won't end your line. Jiyu Xuanwu spoke very quickly. He talked about the 8th generation's granddaughter one moment, then the 6th generation's grandson the next. This made Jiyu Han's scalp go numb. Although Jiyu Han already knew that the Liu Nian family's people were his descendants, Jiyu Xuanwu's impression of Jiyu Xuanwu was still unbearable. After all, according to what Jiyu Xuanwu said, he had married his 27th generation granddaughter and given birth to a son for him. At the same time, he was also his 28th generation grandson. Even 100 orthopedic surgeons in Germany would not be able to correct this ethical relationship. Jiyu Xuanwu naturally did not sense his father's schemes. He continued to narrate the stories of others excitedly. However, my 6th-generation grandson was very disappointing. He could not give birth to a second child, and that man kept egging on my 7th-generation granddaughter, doing everything he could to make Yi Qing the successor of the Liu Nian family. At the same time, he forced my sixth-generation grandson to acknowledge Yi Qing. In the end, under the pressure of the bloodline, my sixth-generation grandson had no choice but to relent. However, he did not agree completely. Instead, he made 10 promises to Yi Qing. If Yi Qing could fulfill these 10 promises within 10 years, he would make Yi Qing the 7th-generation successor of the Liu Nian clan and inherit the bloodline of the Liu Nian clan. However, none of the 10 promises were easy to fulfill. Among them, Yi Qing had to become a famed sword holder within 10 years, kill more than 10,000 yuan ku within 10 years, amass 1 million merit points within 10 years, and kill 10 nether level or above yuan ku within 10 years. These promises were basically impossible for anyone below the famed sword holder level. But my silly big sister Yi Qing actually did it. She originally wanted to find the easiest one out of the 10, which was to find a group of human survivors who did not have the protection of a base city and bring them back to Yangjing City to be protected. Sister Yi Qing originally wanted to go to the desert near her hometown to look for people, but she didn't think that because it was her first time out, she would actually get lost. She ran all the way to Wudong Mountain and accidentally found the group of survivors on Wudong Mountain. Just as Sister Yi Qing was preparing to bring the group of survivors back, she met that dark whatever demon dragon that came to kill people. Sister Yi Qing could have escaped first, but after seeing so many innocent people, she gritted her teeth and prepared to face the demon dragon head-on. Unfortunately, in less than 3 seconds, she was burnt to a crisp by the demon dragon, and her body became as light as water. If I hadn't happened to pass by and saved her, I'm afraid that there would not be a Zhetian Jendi in this world. However, now that I think about it, these so-called coincidences are all fated. Otherwise, if there was no Zhetian Jendi in this world, then there would not be a Lord Father, and there would not be a Lord Father. Am I right, Lord Father? Jiyu Xuanwu looked at Guhan and smiled. Chapter 1593. If you didn't save Yi Qing, you wouldn't have a mother. Guhan couldn't help but complain in his heart after hearing Jiyu Xuanwu's words. But in the end, he suppressed his strange expression and asked calmly, "Then what happened?" "What happened to Yi Qing? Of course I saved her. I killed that demonic dragon in a second. After that, Yi Qing said that she must escort these people back to Yangjing City, but I was restricted from going near Yangjing City. I could only accompany her for a while. At that time, she didn't let down her guard against me and didn't tell me anything. She still pretended to be a man. I saw through her gender at first glance, but I didn't say anything. After watching them enter Yangjing City, I continued to travel. But along the way, she took the initiative to ask me to be her master, hoping to learn my swordsmanship. Thinking that the great Zhetian Jendi's swordsmanship was so bad, I could only teach her some swordsmanship in order to prevent any accidents from happening in Yuzhang City. But father, don't worry, I never taught her our family's 9 swords of mysterious heaven and chaos sword art. She won't know our family's swordsmanship. This Yi Qing is really a genius in swordsmanship. Her comprehension of swordsmanship is too high. She has already reached a high level after learning from me for less than a month. To put it bluntly, her skill level is even higher than when I first met you, father. After we parted ways, I heard that a person called Yi Qing made a name for herself in the human world and gradually became a spirit sword-bearer. She did all the 10 things that she promised the Liu Nian family. If I didn't know that Zhetian Jendi and Yangjing City fell out, I would have thought that she could become the next generation of the Liu Nian family. Then it happened. That Yi Qing was suddenly declared to be a human traitor by Yangjing City. They issued a warrant of the highest level, asking everyone to kill her. When Jiyu Xuanwu said this, Guhan couldn't help but recall the time when he was wanted by the Sword Commission headquarters. It was still vivid in his mind. But now that he thought about it, there was no record of Yi Qing being wanted by Yangjing City. What was going on? Although Guhan's heart was filled with questions, he did not open his mouth to ask. Instead, he quietly listened to Jiyu Xuanwu's explanation. Later, after I finished my travels, I prepared to return to Kunlun Mountain to continue living in seclusion. Finally, I planned to go to Yuzhang City. At that time, Yuzhang City had yet to be built and was just a barren desert. I didn't expect to meet Yi Qing again. However, at that time, Yi Qing was being chased by more than 10 yuan coups and was on the verge of death. I had no choice but to save her again. Probably because I saved her life the second time, she completely opened up to me and told me everything, including her origins and what happened after we parted on Wudang Mountain. She really did the 10 things that the Liunian clan had promised her. The Liunian clan seemed to want to fulfill their promise and let her become the successor of the Liunian clan. However, she had to fast and bathe for a month and stay in the Liunian clan. And in that 1 month, something happened that made me, your ancestor, feel extremely humiliated. For some reason, my 7th-generation granddaughter suddenly had a change of heart. She secretly had sex with more than 30 men and made Yi Qing's father a cuckold. Yi Qing's father was also someone who could endure. He clearly knew that he had been cuckolded, but in order to ensure that Yi Qing's status as the successor would not change, he endured it silently. He waited until Yi Qing could take over the Liunian clan, waiting until he could truly hold his head up high. However, something unexpected happened. I don't know what happened to my 7th-generation granddaughter, but she actually overcame the doctor's diagnosis that she would never be able to get pregnant. She actually got pregnant while having sex with those men and gave birth to her own flesh and blood. After learning of this, the attitude of our descendants naturally changed drastically. Of course, they would not allow Yi Qing, who was not related by blood, to become the successor of the clan. Yi Qing herself didn't care about it, but her father went crazy. After learning of this, he secretly took out his sword at night and wanted to kill his own wife so that the Liunian clan would have no bloodline. By this time, he had already gone completely mad. Although he knew that he and Yi Qing would both die, the ambition that he had plotted for more than a decade was destroyed in a single night. This setback made him lose all reason. Then, he really killed my unlucky 7th-generation granddaughter. He pierced her heart with a sword, and there was no way for her to survive. After that, her father knew that he wouldn't be able to survive, so he simply committed suicide. In one night, 2 corpses and 3 lives were lost, just like that. When the incident happened, our descendants were naturally furious. They could only watch helplessly as the last of the family's bloodline was cut off, and the murderer had already committed suicide. They had no way to vent their anger, so they could only place all the blame on Yi Qing. It's really embarrassing to say this. I didn't expect my children to be so stupid and dirty, but they really did it. They tied up the ignorant Yi Qing and pushed him onto a pile of firewood. They were going to burn him with fire. However, before she died, the clan gave Yi Qing a routine physical examination. In the end, they found out that Yi Qing had taken medicine in her body, so Yi Qing simply told them everything that happened when she was young. Only then did my descendants know that Yi Qing was actually a girl. What's even more amazing is that after testing Yi Qing's DNA, they were shocked to find that Yi Qing's bloodline was related to the Liunian clan. Yi Qing was actually a distant relative of my descendants. She had about a 30% similarity with my descendants. Father, I really didn't expect this. Our clan is actually related to Zhetian Jendi. Zhetian Jendi is also a distant relative of ours. I don't know if my descendants are related to Yi Qing's ancestors, or if my ancestors are related to Yi Qing. Oh, but my ancestors are father and mother. Mother was in England at that time, so it shouldn't be related to Yi Qing's ancestors. Perhaps Yi Qing's bloodline was left behind by father's ancestors. Jiyu Xuanwu laughed. Jiyu Han also had a smile on his face. If Jiyu Xuanwu knew the truth of the matter, it would be the biggest joke in the world. Chapter 1594. Seeing that Yi Qing was related by blood, my infuriated 6th-generation grandson suddenly had an idea. He decided not to burn Yi Qing to death, but to raise her as a breeding tool so that she could give birth to the 7th generation of the Liunian clan. I don't know what's going on, but our descendants have always been of the same bloodline. We've never had 2 children in a generation, so we can't let any of our children die. Once they die, the entire clan's legacy will be severed. Yi Qing first pretended to be obedient, and even got the family to find an antidote for her, turning her back into a woman. Just as the family stuffed a bunch of men into her room, Yi Qing suddenly went berserk and killed all of them. Then, She found an opportunity to escape from the Liu family. She was chased by the Liu family until she met me. This is the entire process of my interaction with the heaven-shrouding Sword Emperor. After saving her, I expressed my guilt for what had happened to her and helped her become an immortal sword wielder. Then, I realized that my descendants would lose their legacy. With no other choice, I could only break my oath and return to the Liu family. I revealed my identity and scolded that useless sixth-generation grandson of mine, forcing him to take back all orders to kill Yi Qing. At the same time, I sealed the fact that Yi Qing was a woman and treated it as if it had never happened. How did you get my seventh-generation grandson to believe that you were his ancestor? As Jiyu Xuanwu spoke till here, Jiyu Han suddenly raised his head and asked curiously, under normal circumstances, for an ancestor that has been dead for over 100 years, wouldn't it be a little strange for it to suddenly appear? That's simple. If they don't believe me, I'll just beat them up until they do, Jiyu Xuanwu said calmly, but his tone was domineering. I used the 9 swords of heavenly profound, the chaotic sword art, and the 100 million sword art that my enemy created to beat up everyone in the Liu family. None of them dared to say anything against me. At that time, there happened to be a few Yuanko who had connections with our Liu family since the Great Calamity. They even stayed in the Liu family for a long time and became guest elders of the Liu family. After seeing me fight, these guest elders naturally confirmed my identity and didn't dare to act rashly again. Hearing Jiyu Xuanwu say this, Guhan could imagine the scene of Jiyu Xuanwu slaughtering everyone in the Liunan mountain and teaching his descendants a lesson. This was also what Guhan had wanted to do in the past. However, with the appearance of Liuyan Ling and Liu Nian, the Liunan family was like half a home to Guhan. Of course, Guhan could not do such a thing. Afterwards, I performed some simple treatment on my useless 6th-generation grandson, allowing him to temporarily recover his fertility. After a week of hard work, I finally succeeded in getting the woman pregnant. After ensuring that the legacy of my Liuyan clan would not end, I left the Liuyan clan and returned to the Kunlun Mountains to continue living in seclusion. This seclusion lasted for 400 years. 400 years passed quickly as Jiyu Xuanwu spoke casually. However, there was something in Jiyu Xuanwu's words that piqued Guhan's curiosity. How did you restore the fertility of our descendants? After all, even technology can't do this. It's just that the technology back then couldn't do it. Jiyu Xuanwu smiled bitterly. At that time, it had only been over 100 years since the Great Calamity, and the human race had yet to recover their technological standards from before the Great Calamity. Therefore, even the most basic artificial insemination and cultivating embryos in vitro were not possible. As for my good-for-nothing grandson, he was injured when he was young and broke that thing. There's no way for him to recover. So, I could only use consciousness fragments to manually create some tadpoles from pure milk and send them deep into the bodies of different women. This saved the tadpoles from having to travel long distances under normal circumstances, and allowed them to reach their destination in one go. However, because the tadpoles were congenitally deficient, the children they gave birth to were also congenitally deficient. Later on, I heard that the child was not even 30 years old. He died when he was only a famed swordsman. He was only able to carry on the family line. When Jiyu Xuanwu finished his words, Jiyu Han also recalled it. When the heaven-shrouding Sword Emperor was at his peak, the Liuyan family was indeed very quiet. The descendants of that generation rarely appeared in public, and they died at a young age. They became the weakest descendant in the history of the Liuyan family. It was because of their relationship. However, Guhan felt that it was a pity that Jiyu Xuanwu's story about Yi Qing ended there. Jiyu Xuanwu never met Yi Qing again, so Guhan did not know what happened to Yi Qing after that. And what about the descendants of the Yi family? Were they really Yi Qing's descendants? Although Guhan had all sorts of guesses about Yi Qing's story, Jiyu Xuanwu's story was not finished. Soon, it reached the most crucial moment, which was Artoria's time. I've been living in seclusion on Mount Kunlun for nearly 600 years. I thought I would continue living in seclusion on Mount Kunlun until my father was born and I reunited with him. At this point, Jiyu Xuanwu's tone suddenly became a little sorrowful. But the Alps mountain battle that caused the humans to suffer heavy casualties happened. I didn't want to interfere in this matter and let the humans fight on. But when I saw the humans fighting with no fear of death, when I saw those sword-bearers scrambling to sacrifice themselves, and when I saw my descendants about to die tragically in the hands of Virokana, I finally couldn't hold back and made a move. I used all my strength and shot out a sword aura of chaos unification from the sky, repelling Virokana and barely protecting the foundation of humanity. What? The sword aura that saved the entire human race was shot by you. Guhan was shocked by his daughter's words. In human history, there were many different opinions about the sword aura that saved the entire human race during the most difficult battle in the Alps. The consensus was that the owner of the sword aura had surpassed the level of an emperor swordsman and reached an unprecedented level. However, no one knew who the owner of the sword aura was, not even Guhan. Who would have thought that the mystery would be revealed? This sword chi had actually been unleashed by his own daughter, Jiyu Xuanwu. This shocked Jiyu Han, but at the same time, he could not help but feel a little confused. Could it be that his daughter's ability had already surpassed an emperor sword wielder? In that case, she had reached the same level as him. If he fought with her, sect leader Tongtian would be dead for sure. Thinking of this, Guhan's blood began to boil. This was an unexpected surprise. It seemed like the prime of Tongtian would definitely die this time. Chapter 1595. Actually, I don't know what level I'm at now. It's just that when I was living in seclusion at the top of Kunlun Mountain, I suddenly saw the sun rise one day. I was filled with emotions and suddenly broke through to this level that I'm at now, which I find a little strange. I don't know if I've already surpassed the Emperor Sword level. Jiyu Xuanwu said with a bitter smile. You don't know? Jiyu Han stared blankly for a moment before tapping his finger lightly on the wooden table in front of him. A dark green seedling instantly sprouted from the surface of the table and rapidly grew. It sprouted branches, bore flowers, and bloomed flowers. In the end, it turned into a pure white carnation. It glistened brightly on the table while emitting a faint fragrance. Millimeter. Jiyu Xuanwu nodded his head, and just like Jiyu Han, he tapped lightly on the table, and another flower bloomed, and what Jiyu Xuanwu released was actually an extremely bright red rose. To be able to forcefully grow a flower on the table without a seed was something that could be done by Yuenko, who was a mage. However, for an Emperor Sword level sword wielder who fought with a sword, this was definitely beyond the capabilities of an Emperor Sword level sword wielder. Looks like you've already reached the level of a sage, Guhan said with a serious expression. Is this the legendary level of a sage? It's the same level as the prime of Tongtian. Jiyu Xuanwu glanced at the red rose. Within a second, the entire table immediately bloomed with countless roses, filling up the entire table. The original appearance of the table could no longer be seen. That's right. To create all things are in the heart. This is the level of a sage. Guhan nodded and smiled happily. Then, his expression turned ugly. As a father, I've gone through a lot of hardships to barely reach this level. I didn't expect my daughter to have already reached this level. Compared to you, I'm far inferior. Father, how can you say that? I've stayed on Kunlun Mountain for 400 years before I finally reached this step. But father, you're not even 70 years old yet. I'm far inferior to you. Jiyu Xuanwu sighed sincerely. All right. There's no need for us father and daughter to flatter each other. Why don't you tell me what happened next? Artoria, how did you and your mother come to this place? Guhan asked curiously. That was the story that happened after the battle in the Alps mountains. After that battle, humans hated the Martyr's Palace and Yuan Ku, who started the battle in the Alps mountains. Coincidentally, humans welcomed a period of geniuses. There were a total of 4 Emperor Sword wielders in the world at the same time. It was also at that time that I went out to travel again. In the end, I met Ardwulf, who was struggling for his life. After learning about Mother from him, I immediately rushed to Xianyang Airport and rescued Mother. I removed the filth from her and sent her to Yangjing City. So, you're the real protagonist in the history of Artoria. Guhan glanced at his daughter. Once upon a time, Guhan thought that he would return to the past and save Artoria according to the storyline of the dungeon. Now, it seemed like it was all thanks to his daughter. Hihi, a father and a daughter are the same. A daughter saving mother is equivalent to a father saving mother. Isn't that right? Jiyu Xuanwu laughed and continued, the story that happened next was similar to what was recorded in history. In the end, Artoria led the 4 human emperor sword wielders to the headquarters of the Martyr's Palace in the dimensional space. In the end, the Martyr's Palace used a suicidal tactic to cut off the connection between the headquarters and the main world. Those emperor sword wielders were afraid that they would be trapped in the dimensional space and unable to return, so they abandoned Mother and fled back to the main world. Mother was forced to enter the seamless corridor to escape. At that time, I was worried about Mother, so I hid at the side and watched quietly. When I realized that Mother had entered the seamless corridor, I realized that something was wrong. But it was already too late. I was forced into the seamless corridor and could only follow behind Mother. After I entered the seamless corridor, I immediately began to look for my mother. In the end, when I found Mother, she was no longer the mother from before. She said that she had a daughter, and the second time she entered was to find her daughter's father. It was only then that I realized that the person I found might not be the mother who had entered before, but the mother who had mysteriously disappeared after giving birth to me. Even now, I still don't know what happened between these 2 mothers. Jiyu Xuanwu lowered his head and said sorrowfully. At the side, Guhan was sweating profusely. Jiyu Xuanwu did not know the difference between the 2 Artorias and what happened between them. But Jiyu Han himself knew very well that the Artoria that Jiyu Xuanwu had found was clearly the Artoria that he had sent out of the seamless corridor. In order to search for the truth that had long since been forgotten, she had once more entered the seamless corridor. However, Artoria hadn't been able to recover her memories. Instead, she had encountered her daughter, who had gone through many trials and tribulations many years later. As for the Artoria who first entered the seamless corridor, of course, she met Guhan at the first moment, and then a series of twists and turns occurred. Child. Guhan moved his lips, as if he wanted to tell Jiyu Xuanwu the truth. But when the words were about to come out of his mouth, Guhan swallowed them back down. Right now was the moment when father and daughter had just reunited. There was no need to talk about such a depressing topic. He would find an opportunity in the future to tell her. At the same time, Jiyu Xuanwu's story continued. After finding Mother, I discovered that not only had she lost a large amount of her memories, but she had also become somewhat dull. Clearly, entering the seamless corridor twice in a row had deeply damaged Mother's soul, causing her to fluctuate between normal and demented. I knew that Mother couldn't continue to stay in the seamless corridor, but I didn't dare to directly destroy the seamless corridor. After all, there was still another Mother in the seamless corridor. If I destroyed this place, wouldn't the other Mother be forever lost in the dimensional world? So I could only temporarily change the rules of the seamless corridor and walk to the end of the endless corridor. At the same time, I discovered this door, as well as the time behind the door, and this beautiful flower fruit mountain. Although I don't know why this flower fruit mountain would appear here, or why it would appear at the end of the endless corridor, it is indeed a wonderful place that one would forget to leave. Chapter 1596. Afterwards, your daughter pondered that Lord Father should be born in a few hundred years. At this time, I should also be born in the origin world. There can't be 2 of me in the same world. Otherwise, the supreme law that controls the operation of the entire world will become chaotic. In addition, Mother also likes the environment of Mount Huagua. Therefore, your daughter decided not to return to the origin world. Instead, I quietly stayed in Mount Huagua and waited for time to pass by. At this point, Jiyu Xuanwu's story was finally finished. Her life's trajectory for the past 1,000 years was completely presented in front of Jiyu Han. Why didn't you come back to find me? Guhan gently looked at his daughter. At the same time, he asked with a slight rebuke, if you knew when you would return to the past, why didn't you immediately return to my side? Do you know how much pain father felt because of your departure all these years? I'm sorry, your daughter has long wanted to return to find father. However, your daughter was afraid that your daughter's appearance would disturb your life. Although your daughter doesn't know what will happen in the future, your daughter faintly knows that father will only be able to obtain greater power after you are completely separated from me. Moreover, your daughter believes that father will find your daughter sooner or later. Your daughter only needs to quietly wait here for father. Just like today, your daughter has finally found father. When her voice fell, Jiyu Xuanwu could no longer suppress the surging emotions in her heart. She threw herself into Guhan's embrace and began to wantonly cry. Child. Father has let you down. Father should have found you long ago. Jiyu Han also hugged his daughter tightly, and the two of them instantly burst into tears. Tears flowed freely, and their cries alternated with each other. It was unknown how much time had passed before the voices gradually calmed down. Lord Father. You see, your daughter is really too insensible. She actually made father cry for so long. Jiyu Xuanwu also became aware of this gaffe. She shyly jumped up from Guhan's embrace. Then, she frantically rummaged through a cabinet in the room. After a while, she came back with a large brocade box. At the same time, she waved her hand and the blooming roses on the table disappeared. Then, Jiyu Xuanwu solemnly placed the brocade box on the table. What is this? Guhan looked at the brocade box and asked curiously. This is a letter that your daughter wrote to Lord Father. Jiyu Xuanwu's face was slightly red as he said, in the past 1,000 years, every time I miss my father, I can't help but pick up my brush and write a letter to my father. It's just that these letters have never been sent out and have always been left with me, gradually accumulating to this extent. Guhan glanced at the brocade box from the corner of his eyes. He discovered that this brocade box was actually a dimensional equipment. There was a dimensional space inside. At the same time, there were at least 100,000 letters stored in this brocade box. It was obvious that his daughter was constantly thinking of this incompetent father of hers. Every 2 to 3 days, she would write a letter to him. Seeing this scene, Guhan was probably crying again. Can I take a look at these letters? Guhan trembled as he looked at the brocade box. Yes. Jiyu Xuanwu nodded and said, Sex was originally written for Lord Father. Of course Lord Father can take a look. Then, Jiyu Xuanwu personally took out a dozen or so letters from the brocade box and solemnly placed them in front of Guhan. Guhan carefully picked up these letters that had been stored for who knows how long and had been baptized by time. He very carefully tore open the sealed envelope and took out the yellowed letter inside. Then, he concentrated on reading it. When Guhan read the letters, he practically swallowed every word in the letter into his stomach. Every time he finished reading a letter, he couldn't help but tear up. These letters were filled with his daughter's deep longing for him. Guhan felt that he wasn't reading a letter, but a burning torch. A torch that could forcefully roast him. Every time he read a letter, Guhan's regret towards Jiyu Xuanwu deepened. He was filled with endless regret. If he had been able to save his daughter back then, and let her share the world with him, how wonderful would that have been? Although Guhan read each letter very slowly, as time passed, he still finished reading them one by one. There was only one letter left in his hand. Guhan opened the letter. His expression changed from being touched to a strange expression. What is this? Guhan asked Jiyu Xuanwu as he held the letter. I didn't expect to casually pick it up and actually take it out. Seeing this letter, Jiyu Xuanwu was also shocked. Then, he lowered his head and said, This is something that I randomly wrote when I missed my father the most 700 years ago. I felt that if there was such a contract, and if father was able to sign it, perhaps father would not leave my side. Sigh. Hearing Jiyu Xuanwu's words, Guhan let out a deep sigh. Then, he powerlessly placed the letter on the table. At the top of the letter, the words contract of being together forever appeared. That's right, it was a contract, and a very simple one at that. The entire contract only had one sentence. Daddy Guhan, Mommy Artoria, Daughter Jiyu Xuanwu, I hope that we can be together forever. We don't ask to be born in the same year and month, but we hope to die in the same year and month. At the same time, there were already 2 red signatures at the end of the contract. One was Jiyu Xuanwu's signature, and the other was Artoria's signature. There was also a space that was obviously left for Guhan's signature. Father. Doesn't my daughter's contract look very stupid? Jiyu Xuanwu noticed that Guhan's expression was strange, and immediately said in a depressed tone, "No. There's no contract more touching than this in the world." Guhan shook his head forcefully and held the contract tightly. His body was trembling from head to toe. Finally, he spread the contract open and extended his right hand to Jiyu Xuanwu. "For me." "What?" "Give me the pen." "Oh." Jiyu Xuanwu immediately placed the pen in his hand into Guhan's hand, and then Guhan signed his name on the contract. "No. You can't sign it. You can't sign this." At this moment, the door to the room was suddenly pushed open, and Artoria, who was naked and messy, suddenly appeared in front of them. What was worth noting was that Artoria's naked body was full of scars. Some of these scars were marks of being whipped, while others were marks of being tied up with iron chains. "What's going on?" Guhan asked with a blank expression. At this moment, Guhan's hand character had just finished the last stroke on the contract. Chapter 1597. She's not our daughter, she's not our daughter. She's the prime of Tongtian. She's the prime of Tongtian. This was the second sentence that Artoria uttered as she struggled to escape. Jiyu Xuanwu's expression changed instantly after hearing this sentence. All his previous agitation disappeared and was replaced by indifference. Whether it was the face he looked at Artoria or the face he looked at Guhan, his expression was indifferent. "You actually broke free from my restriction. How did you do it?" Jiyu Xuanwu asked indifferently. Artoria didn't answer his question because she had exhausted all her strength in order to break free from Jiyu Xuanwu's control. Her body fell heavily to the ground. However, Guhan reacted in time and quickly reached out his hand. Artoria was pulled into his arms by Guhan. A thick blanket appeared out of thin air and quickly wrapped Artoria's wounded body. "Are you the father of my child, the man named Guhan?" Artoria opened her eyes weakly and looked at Guhan blankly. "Yes, it's me. I'm Guhan. I'm the father of our child." Guhan's eyes couldn't help but moisten a little as he nodded vigorously. "Why is it different from what I imagined?" Artoria gasped weakly. "How could I, Artoria, fall in love with a man like you and even have a child with you? This is really a joke of fate." After saying this, Artoria lost consciousness and fainted in Jiyu Han's arms. Although Guhan wanted to save Artoria immediately, he obviously didn't have the conditions to do so at this time. He could only put Artoria into the dimensional space. Now, what Guhan really needed to face was his biological daughter who stood opposite him, Jiyu Xuanwu. "What's going on? What did you do to your mother?" After settling Artoria down, Guhan angrily asked the Jiyu Xuanwu. "As you can see, this woman is not obedient, but this deity cannot kill her for the time being. I can only use some methods to trap her, to prevent her from escaping. But I did not expect that she actually escaped. This is really strange," Jiyu Xuanwu said indifferently. "Then why did you hurt your mother like this?" Guhan continued to question. "Originally, I did not intend to harm her, but you caused the death of my disciple and destroyed my Qingping. This lord's anger can only be vented on your wife's body. What, do you have an opinion?" Jiyu Xuanwu said indifferently. "You really are Tongtian." Jiyu Xuanwu's words made Guhan suck in a breath of cold air. Her words just now was undoubtedly admitting her identity. Just like what Artoria had said, Jiyu Xuanwu was the prime of Tongtian. "No, if your sect leader Tongtian. Where did you take my daughter? Where is my daughter? Where is my child, Jiyu Xuanwu?" Guhan asked with an incomparably crazy look. "Hehe, where is your daughter? Do you need me to tell you?" Jiyu Xuanwu, "No." Tongtian smiled coldly. "I did not expect you to step into the path of a sage in just 30 years. This is really beyond my expectations. How did you see the path with your own eyes? The heavenly Tao has already been lost, so it should be impossible for you to see the path. But forget it, it's not important. Since you have become a sage, you should know that nothing in the world can deceive a sage, let alone the flesh and blood of a sage. In front of us, what is true, and what is false is false. If it was not for the fact that I was injured 30 years ago, I would not have been deceived by your simple and crude head-splitting technique. Right now, both of us are at our peak state. You know better than anyone that the person standing in front of you is your daughter, otherwise you would not hug me and cry, right? This is a genuine sage's tear. It's not easy to see a sage cry. Sect leader Tongtian sighed with emotion. His words sounded a little vague, but in fact, he was referring to one thing. That was, the person standing in front of him was the real Jiyu Xuanwu, because a sage could see through the essence of all things, no fake things could deceive the eyes of a sage. Otherwise, with Guhan's degree of cunning, it was impossible for him to be deceived by the fake Jiyu Xuanwu. Therefore, there was only one truth, and that was that the prime of Tongtian in front of him was also Guhan's biological daughter, Jiyu Xuanwu. The two of them existed as one. The prime of Tongtian is my daughter. My daughter is the prime of Tongtian. Guhan weakly took a dozen steps back. He could not believe the fact that made him shiver all over. Yes. Although I don't want to admit it, it seems that I am indeed your biological daughter. It is really sad and lamentable. I actually want to kill my own biological father. Alas, everything in this world, including the pair of hands and the pen behind my back, can only be played by him. But forget it, let's forget about what happened before. The victory already belongs to me, Guhan. Although you have set foot on the sage position with untold hardships, your path ends here. Let this beautiful Mount Huagua be your final burial place. Tongtian smiled slightly. You are a little too confident. Guhan suppressed the anger and pain in his heart, looked at Tongtian coldly, and said, You and I are both sages now, and we have both set foot on that final realm. What makes you think that you can defeat me? I, Guhan, am unparalleled in this world in swordsmanship. You are not my match. Be quiet, don't be so noisy. Tongtian shrugged his shoulders. Yes, your swordsmanship is indeed unparalleled in this world. Even I was defeated by your swordsmanship, and even my 5 primordial treasures fell into your hands. But so what? I don't need a sword now, I only need this pen to kill you. After hearing Tongtian's words, Guhan seemed to instantly understand something. Without saying anything, he immediately chopped at the table with a sword chi, trying to destroy the table and everything on it. It's useless. Even if you can transcend the limits of this world, don't even think about destroying this pen. Tongtian did not stop Guhan and let him destroy the whole table. However, no matter how sharp and powerful Guhan's sword chi was, even if the whole table was destroyed to the size of a quark, the piece of paper and the pen were still quietly floating in the air. Tongtian gently pointed his finger, and the pen and the piece of paper flew into his hand. This is a contract. According to you humans, as long as a contract is written and signed, it can never be changed. Tongtian said with a smile. Chapter 1598. The image of the ordinary brush changed instantly in sect leader Tongtian's hand. At the same time, Guhan's pupils shrank into a small dot. At this moment, that ordinary-looking pen became the all-world's brush that killed Hongjun ancestor. Meanwhile, Ji Yuhan saw it with his own eyes in Qingping's memory, the all-world's brush that helped Pan Jiyu to wake up and create the world. Just now, the pen he signed on the contract was actually the all-world's brush. Guhan, you are my last companion in this world. I don't want to lie to you now. Do you know what this world brush is capable of and how I killed Hongjun ancestor? Sect leader Tongtian asked Guhan suddenly. I guessed it, but I'm not sure. Guhan smiled bitterly. Oh, tell me about it. This 10,000 worlds brush strokes are extremely heavy, a single stroke unchangeable. Ji Yuhan said. You are really smart. You even guessed it. Sect leader Tongtian exclaimed. Yes, this world brush is so powerful that everything can be fixed with one stroke. Anything written by this brush, even if it is going to destroy the world, kill immortals, and kill gods, it will be fixed. Even an existence like Teacher Hongjun can be easily killed with a single stroke. After my master imprisoned me, he argued with me from time to time. He said that I was too extreme, but I complained that he was unfair and partial to my 2 senior brothers. My teacher, on the other hand, was very stubborn. He refused to admit that he was unfair no matter what. So I took out this brush and wrote on the paper, if Hongjun is dishonest, the way of heaven will cease to exist. Then I asked my master if he dared to sign his name on this paper. Although my master knew everything in the world, he didn't know the existence of the world brush. He signed his name on the paper. Guess what happened after that? Sect leader Tongtian asked. Then the heavenly Tao will no longer exist, and Hongjun will also be finished, right? Ji Yuhan smiled bitterly. That's right. With just this name, the heavenly Tao is finished, and Hongjun is finished along with it. All of a sudden, sect leader Tongtian began to laugh wildly. You can't imagine master's expression at that time. He watched the way of heaven being destroyed, and then he, who had merged with the way of heaven, perished together with it. Although his strength was 10 times stronger than mine, he had no ability to resist at all. He could only watch himself die. Now that I think of that desperate expression, I still feel it's so wonderful. Ha ha ha. Master's hundreds of millions of years of bitter cultivation, tens of thousands of years of planning, and dreams of transcending the great Tao have all turned into nothingness with a single stroke of his brush. There's nothing more wonderful than this in the world. Ha 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 ha. Sect leader Tongtian laughed even more arrogantly and cheerfully, and the way to use the myriad worlds brush was clear at a glance. As long as one wrote a sentence with this brush and signed their name, the sentence would immediately come true for them. This was the effect of the world brush. One stroke of the brush was extremely powerful, and one stroke of the brush could cause all things to be set in stone. This was the meaning of this brush. At the same time, Guhan naturally thought of the word he had just signed with the myriad worlds brush. Father Ji Yuhan, Mother Artoria, Daughter Ji Xuanwu, we can be together forever. We don't ask to be born in the same year and month, but we hope to die in the same year and month. I was wondering why you were so willing to play the role of my daughter, and you did it so vividly. It turns out that you just wanted to trick me into signing that name. Ji Yuhan sighed and said, yes, it's really not easy to make you sign your name willingly. You're so crafty that even I fell into your trap when I was careless. If I wasn't your daughter, I'm afraid I wouldn't have tricked you into signing it. Sect leader Tongtian nodded and said, the key point of this contract is not to be born in the same year and month, but to die in the same year and month. Ji Yuhan carefully thought over the words written on the contract, and at the same time, his expression became even more bitter. So, if any one of me, my wife, or my daughter dies, then the other two will definitely die at the same time, right? Yes, you're right. It's true that I can't kill you with your current ability, but I've planted an irremovable magic power in Artoria's body. In another hour, Artoria will definitely die. At that time, you, your daughter, and your wife will all die together. There won't be any mistakes. This is the power of the eternal world brush, Tongtian said in an incomparably arrogant manner. Why do you have to make it so troublesome? Guhan sighed and said, if the brush is so powerful, why don't you write on the paper sect leader Tongtian is invincible in the world and can kill any opponent in seconds and then sign your name? Then, you can kill me, right? Why do you have to play the role of my daughter to deceive me? If it's possible, it's naturally excellent. But it's a pity that I can only see it but not use it. Sect leader Tongtian's face suddenly showed deep jealousy. Not everyone can use this myriad worlds brush. Only the protagonist of this world, that is, the person with the identity of Hongjun, can use this brush. Since ancient times, there have only been 3 people who have been able to truly utilize this brush. Let me guess. The 3 people are me, Ancestor Hongjun, and Kunzu, right? Guhan said. Yes, it's the 3 of you. Fleeting Year Calendar has already signed his name on the contract. It's a pity that I didn't completely integrate with this body at that time, so I couldn't set up a death trap. I could only let him be exiled from the main world forever and be lost in the dimensional world forever. Otherwise, the new Hongjun wouldn't be born, sect leader Tongtian said angrily. At the same time, Tongtian's words made Ji Yuhan feel bitter. At that time, Tongtian had not completely merged with the Black Tortoise's body, so he could not kill Fleeting Year. It seemed that sect leader Tongtian could trick him into signing a death contract. Didn't it mean that he had completely integrated with his daughter's body? What did you do to my daughter? Anyway, I'm going to die in an hour. Can't you just let me die knowing what happened? Guhan sighed and said very sadly, "Haha, if you hadn't harmed my poor disciple 30 years ago, if you hadn't harmed my Qingping, perhaps I would have let you die in the clear. But since you've killed my disciple and harmed my Qingping, then you can die without knowing why. I'll make sure that even if you die, you won't be able to die peacefully," Tongtian sect leader said angrily. Ji Yuhan felt that he had been wronged. Qingping's death was indeed caused by Ji Yuhan. However, Goddess Wudong didn't care about Guhan's death. Sect leader Tongtian killed Qingping in order to escape. Forget it, it was useless to reason with sect leader Tongtian now. Sect leader Tongtian was extremely stubborn, so it was useless to talk nonsense. Therefore, Ji Yuhan could only sit quietly and pour himself a cup of tea. Then he said faintly, "Since you don't want to say it, let me guess." Chapter 1599. Actually, from the moment my daughter was born, you had already possessed my daughter's body, right? Guhan calmed down as he looked at the rather irascible Grandmaster Tongtian. The Grandmaster Tongtian didn't react to Guhan's words at all, but his pupils involuntarily contracted. Clearly, Guhan had guessed correctly. Black Tortoise was born in the Seamless Corridor, and the Seamless Corridor is a place used for sealing. I still remember that when she was born, a tortoise phenomenon appeared, which is why she was named Black Tortoise. At the time, I just thought that it was a simple natural phenomenon, but now it seems that it was a sign that you had possessed my daughter's body, right? The Grandmaster Tongtian still didn't say anything, but tacit agreement was an admission. Clearly, Guhan had guessed correctly yet again. The Seamless Corridor is a place used to seal you. 5 saints simultaneously placed this seal on you, and even the remnant divine sense of old Lord Taishang serves as a jailer to watch over you. Unless the Seamless Corridor is destroyed, there is no way for your true body to leave it. Actually, this rule isn't just for you. It is for everyone who enters the Seamless Corridor. Mortals or saints, as long as they enter the Seamless Corridor from the outside world, there is no way for them to leave. Even the jailer, old Lord Taishang himself, is unable to escape from the Seamless Corridor. This seems to be an unbreakable paradox. And if you want to escape from the Seamless Corridor, the only way is to borrow a body to be reborn. Only a newborn, pure, and flawless life that has no trace of its existence in this world can be used as a tool for you to borrow a body to be reborn. And this unlucky person is my own daughter, right? At the time, I didn't quite understand why old Lord Taishang would say that the Seamless Corridor had already lost its original purpose. I thought that something had happened to the Seamless Corridor itself, but now it seems that the prisoner responsible for watching over the Seamless Corridor has already escaped. Naturally, there's no longer any reason for the Seamless Corridor to continue existing. As for the jailers watching over the Seamless Corridor, they naturally don't need to continue working day after day, forever without end. Also, I actually saw an old friend on the way here. If I remember correctly, I should have sent this old friend back to his dimensional world. But at the time, he was still alive and kicking in the Seamless Corridor. That's why I'm guessing that when I first arrived, it was at the same time that I personally ended all of the laws within the Seamless Corridor. From the looks of it, you should have escaped from the Seamless Corridor long ago. Otherwise, there's no way I could have ended the Seamless Corridor. Am I right? Guhan asked again. Not bad, you guessed it right. This time, sect leader Tongtian no longer remained silent. He admitted all this straightforwardly. As a result, the final truth was laid out in front of everyone. The first time he entered the Seamless Corridor, Guhan was just an immortal-level sword wielder. He had no way of understanding the laws of the Seamless Corridor at all, and so he could only let old Lord Taishang do as he pleased. But the second time he entered the Seamless Corridor, Guhan had already become a saint. And as a saint, as soon as he entered the Seamless Corridor, he already knew the laws of the Seamless Corridor like the back of his hand. There were 2 core laws of the Seamless Corridor. The first was that no matter how powerful one was, as long as one entered the Seamless Corridor, they would never be able to leave or destroy the Seamless Corridor. The second core law was that as long as sect leader Tongtian was still alive within the Seamless Corridor, then the first law would never be able to be broken. These 2 laws could be said to have logically sealed off all possibilities for sect leader Tongtian to escape from the Seamless Corridor. Sect leader Tongtian would never be able to escape the cage that was the seamless corridor. But then again, there was no such thing as an unbreakable paradox in this world. Every paradox had its own logical flaw, and this paradox was no exception. The biggest flaw in this paradox was that if Grandmaster Tongtian died in the seamless corridor, then if there was a life form that had been born and nurtured in the seamless corridor from the beginning to the end, then once this life form killed Grandmaster Tongtian, it would be able to leave the seamless corridor as it pleased. No one would be able to stop it from leaving the seamless corridor. Yes, that's right. I trust that all of you who have read up to this point should understand by now. The black tortoise was a life form that had been born and nurtured within the seamless corridor from the very beginning. It was a life form that was not bound by the laws of the seamless corridor, and this was the only chance for sect leader Tongtian to escape from the seamless corridor. Thus, when the black tortoise was born, sect leader Tongtian did two things. First, he sent his true soul into the body of the newly born black tortoise, merging it with the true soul that the black tortoise had been nurturing. This way, sect leader Tongtian would no longer be sect leader Tongtian. To put it more accurately, sect leader Tongtian would become the black tortoise skyspan. To put it more accurately, sect leader Tongtian would be reincarnated into Yi Qing's womb, becoming Guhan's daughter, the black tortoise, while sect leader Tongtian would be nothing more than a memory of the black tortoise's past life. That's more or less what it meant. And the second thing sect leader Tongtian did was to use the last of his strength to allow the newly formed black tortoise skyspan to kill off the remnants of his divine sense, causing sect leader Tongtian to truly die in a logical sense. And thus, the core of the seamless corridor's existence was completely broken. Following the birth of the black tortoise, the seamless corridor had actually already lost its ability to trap others. At that time, there was no need for them to fight for the right to leave the seamless corridor. All they had to do was wait patiently, and the seamless corridor would collapse on its own, or perhaps the saints would hasten its collapse, and yes, that's right. The person who had hastened the collapse of the seamless corridor was Guhan, who had entered the seamless corridor for the second time. And through this acceleration, Guhan was able to confirm that sect leader Tongtian, who was currently in the seamless corridor, had already died. As for the true identity of the black tortoise, Guhan now had a firm grasp on it. Although Guhan had already guessed the truth of the matter long ago, the ultimate boss who had been hiding in the shadows, the one who had plotted to destroy the entire human race, was none other than his own daughter, the black tortoise. From the moment his daughter was born, she had become the body that sect leader Tongtian coveted, and the key to his revival. From a certain perspective, it was his appearance that gave sect leader Tongtian the chance to escape the seamless corridor and be revived. If he hadn't entered the endless corridor to search for Artoria, then sect leader Tongtian would never have been able to obtain a brand new body. It was Guhan who had harmed his own daughter, but then again, from the looks of it, sect leader Tongtian was, in essence, Guhan's own daughter. This was just like reincarnation. No matter what identity she had in her previous life, in this era, sect leader Tongtian was Guhan's own daughter. Chapter 1600. Although I have said this many times before, I still have to say it once more. You are simply too smart, so smart that I am afraid. The Skyrend sect lord let out a long sigh. Indeed, it is as you said, I borrowed your daughter's body in order to escape the seamless corridor, but that also caused all of my power to disappear, returning me to the level of an ordinary mortal. Because I was afraid that my memories would cause the seamless corridor to think that I was still alive, I could only choose to seal my original memories, allowing this body to grow into a personality that belonged to her. More importantly, I didn't know at the time. This child was actually your woman, my former disciple, the daughter of my future greatest opponent. In terms of ethics and blood relations, I had to call you father. This is a fact that no matter how strong I am, I will never be able to change. Although this was the key to my escape, it was also my greatest failure. When my memories were reawakened, the original personality of this body was already very mature. This personality even had the power of a demi-saint. My memories were no longer able to take control of this body. I could only subtly influence the original personality to accept this memory, and then fuse them together, allowing Grandmaster Tongtian to be reborn in this body perfectly. This is probably the reason why Kunzu was so determined to kill you, even if he had to abandon his deep relationship with you. He even wanted to completely erase all traces of your existence from this world. Guhan said softly. You were subtly influencing Black Tortoise's personality, so Black Tortoise showed many abnormal signs of a split personality, and even did many things behind the scenes that were not beneficial to humanity. As the man who shared a bed with my daughter, Kunzu naturally noticed her abnormality at the first moment. Even without Grandmaster Tongtian saying anything, Guhan could almost see what the truth was. Under the influence of Grandmaster Tongtian's memories, Gu Black Tortoise would definitely show many strange symptoms similar to those of a schizophrenic patient, and these symptoms naturally could not escape the eyes of the man who shared a bed with her, namely Kunzu. After Kunzu noticed his wife's abnormality, he naturally tried every means possible to figure out the reason for this abnormality. Although he did not know what had happened during this period of time, the result was without a doubt that Kunzu had discovered everything in the end. He had discovered that his wife was the reincarnation of the culprit who had destroyed the entire world. His ancient sword Tear Sword Mistress was a trump card that the boss had placed beside him, ready to betray him at any time. He had discovered that as long as he killed the Jiyu Xuanwu, the entire human race would be able to welcome peace. Therefore, for the sake of mankind, Kunzu had decided to abandon his feelings and kill Jiyu Xianwu without any hesitation. This was also the reason why Ying Zheng had been hunting Jiyu Xianwu for over 10 years. What Kunzu had done was indeed for the sake of mankind, a choice he had no choice but to make from the standpoint of mankind. That's right, but it wasn't the man who found out the truth, it was this stupid personality who told the man the truth. Sect leader Tongtian snorted coldly. Actually, I was too impatient at that time. After discovering that the man was Hong Jun, I couldn't wait to make him sign the same contract as you. However, I didn't expect the original personality's love for that man to be so deep. Even at the risk of her own personality being destroyed, she still wanted to perish together with my personality. Helpless, I could only change the contract and banish that man into a dimensional space forever. He's probably still floating in some dimensional space now. This was really too good for him. Listening to sect leader Tongtian's words, Kunzu was really not dead, but he would never be able to return to the origin world. After this incident, I truly realized that if I couldn't completely fuse with the Jiyu Xianwu's personality, I wouldn't be able to take back my original power, much less progress. However, I tried for a total of 400 years, but I still couldn't find a way to completely fuse with the Jiyu Xianwu. Until 600 years ago, I was suddenly enlightened and found a real way to fuse with the Jiyu Xianwu. Dad, you're so smart. Can you guess what's the way to fuse with the Jiyu Xianwu? Sect leader Tongtian was unwilling to give up, so he wanted to test Guhan's intelligence again. What's there to guess? Isn't it the black crystal that you gave to that stupid woman, Mingyuan? Guhan smiled bitterly. Actually, you've been trapped in a misunderstanding. You always thought that the thing that prevented you from fusing with the Jiyu Xianwu was Black Tortoise. In fact, it's you who really prevented you from fusing with the Jiyu Xianwu. You've been holding on to your identity as sect leader Tongtian, so you can't fuse with the Jiyu Xianwu. Only when you really forget your identity as sect leader Tongtian and give up everything that belongs to sect leader Tongtian can you fuse with the Jiyu Xianwu. Am I right? Dad, why are you so smart? Isn't it better to pretend to be stupid? It's very unfulfilling. Sect leader Tongtian glanced at Guhan angrily. His tone suddenly became as intimate as that of Jiyu Xianwu, as if he was Guhan's real daughter. However, his words and attitude made Guhan feel even more disappointed. It seemed that sect leader Tongtian had really fused with the Jiyu Xianwu completely. It was already so difficult to fuse them together. How difficult it would be to separate them. He was afraid that he would never get his poor daughter back. On the other side, sect leader Tongtian continued to narrate, just as you said, Dad, the key that I can't fuse with the Jiyu Xianwu is actually sect leader Tongtian. I must completely abandon sect leader Tongtian in order to achieve my true self. Therefore, I separated everything in my body that was related to sect leader Tongtian and formed a black crystal. I handed it to the Netherworld Iris Sword Empress so that she could absorb the fragments of sect leader Tongtian's consciousness through the black crystal. In the end, sect leader Tongtian was resurrected. Sigh, I can't believe I was so stupid in the past. I'm ashamed of myself even though I'm secretly watching from the side. Ji Yuhan could not help but feel a chill run down his spine when he heard Ji Xuanwu's voice and tone in Tongtian's image. How is that stupid woman now? Is she still alive? Guhan suddenly asked. Dead. Ji Xuanwu, or rather, Tongtian's sect leader, said straightforwardly, on the day you forced him to retreat, I found him and killed him. Even now, I can't forget his expression of disbelief after I killed him. That was too interesting. I also know that at the moment when I killed her, I really felt my true soul, my true self. At that moment, sect leader Tongtian no longer existed, and Ji Yuxianwu also no longer existed. There was only one name in this world, Ji Yuxianwu Tongtian. Hearing the name of Ji Yuxianwu Tongtian, Guhan felt powerless and collapsed to the ground. At this moment, Guhan knew that his daughter Ji Yuxianwu had completely disappeared. She would never come back. Chapter 1601. How is it? Hearing the news of your daughter's death, do you feel sad, and devastated? Tongtian Black Tortoise looked at Guhan expectantly, hoping to see a sad expression on Guhan's face. I'm sorry to disappoint you. I was quite sad before, but after listening to your explanation, I'm not so sad anymore. Guhan stood up from the ground with a slight smile, looked at Tongtian Black Tortoise and said, if I understand correctly, you are still my daughter, but you have completely integrated with Tongtian. But your body is my, Ji Yuhan's, daughter. This is a fact that can never be changed. Even if the world is destroyed, you are still my, Ji Yuhan's, daughter. You are my, Ji Xuanwu, my daughter. You. Tongtian Black Tortoise paused. After hearing Guhan's words, he, who was originally very happy, suddenly became a little angry. He originally hoped to let Guhan experience the feeling of heartbreak, but he didn't expect Guhan to see it so clearly. But at the same time, Tongtian Black Tortoise felt a little happy in his heart. Great, my father is willing to admit that I am his daughter, great. I am still father's daughter, father does not hate me. This kind of thinking obviously came from Ji Black Tortoise's personality. These two thoughts kept alternating in Tongtian Black Tortoise's heart, giving Tongtian Black Tortoise a splitting headache. But in the end, Tongtian Black Tortoise's personality prevailed. After all, Tongtian Black Tortoise had lived for tens of millions of years, and the accumulation of his personality was far more than the shallow Ji Black Tortoise, so naturally he could easily suppress the part of Ji Black Tortoise's personality to the deepest part of the new personality, which was the position of the subconscious. Forget it, what you said is true, and you are indeed my father. This can't be changed. But so what? Mother is going to die soon, and you will die with her. But don't worry, father. Every Qingming festival, your daughter will pour a pot of good wine on your grave and light a thin incense stick to accompany you. Black Tortoise Tongtian said with a smile. At the same time, he raised the contract with Ji Yuhan's signature. My dear daughter, there's something I don't understand. This contract doesn't just have my and your mother's names on it. Your name is also written on it. Don't tell me you won't die with us. Guhan asked curiously. You should know that as long as you are my daughter, then the Black Tortoise on the contract is you. Whether you change your name to Black Tortoise Tongtian or Tongtian Black Tortoise, it is useless. Don't worry about this, father. If I didn't have complete confidence, I would never sign this contract. Black Tortoise Tongtian smiled proudly, or should I say, your daughter is looking forward to dying with you, Lord Father. I've been looking forward to this day all the time. What do you mean? Guhan's expression suddenly became extremely deep. Do you even need to ask? As long as your daughter dies, Tongtian Black Tortoise will become the prime of Tongtian again, and this damned identity of your daughter will no longer exist. I'm afraid this will be the last time your daughter will call you father. After you die, you will no longer have a daughter, ha 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 ha. Tongtian Black Tortoise Tongtian started laughing hysterically, while Guhan seemed to have suffered a heavy blow. He quietly sat back in his chair and released Artoria from his dimensional pocket. Gu-Han gently caressed Artoria's pale face. Right now, Artoria's heart was convulsing, and her skin was rapidly disintegrating as if she had a malignant tumor, turning into puddles of black liquid. Artoria was indeed dying at an alarming rate. Gu-Han was unwilling to see Artoria lose her life just like that. He immediately mobilized all his nanomachines and prepared to resurrect Artoria using the method of Lucifer's resurrection. But Gu-Han failed. The nanomachines and consciousness fragment resurrection method that had always worked well in the past had all failed at this moment. Gu-Han was horrified to find that he could not recreate Artoria's physical cells. Or rather, every time Gu-Han created a physical cell, it would turn back into pus the next second. Only then did Gu-Han realize that this death was a death based on the rules, a death from the source of existence, and not a simple physical death. Therefore, this was not a death that could be resurrected by creating a physical body. Just like that, Gu-Han could only watch as Artoria's body gradually melted, starting from her hands and feet. Finally, only her head was left in Gu-Han's hand. At this moment, Artoria finally woke up from her deep sleep. She slowly opened her eyes. Before this, Artoria's eyes were filled with confusion when she looked at Gu-Han. She did not know who Gu-Han was, and she had completely lost all of Gu-Han's memories. But this time, when she opened her eyes, Gu-Han once again saw the familiar emotions in Artoria's eyes. She saw the deep love for herself, full of awkwardness and pain. At this moment, Gu-Han understood that Artoria had successfully recovered her memories. She had remembered everything she had forgotten in the seamless corridor and had returned to the real Artoria. But it was too late. It was too late. Artoria had just recovered her memories, and the last remaining part of her head began to liquefy. In the end, there was nothing left in Gu-Han's arms, only a puddle of stinky black water that proved that Artoria had once existed. She's finally dead. Seeing Artoria's death, Heavenspan Black Tortoise let out a joyful sigh. But soon after, turbid tears flowed uncontrollably from her eyes. As time passed, more and more tears flowed, and in the end, they completely covered the beautiful face of the black tortoise. These were tears of sorrow, tears of pain and despair as she watched her own mother die by her own hands. Damn it, this isn't your mother. She's just an illusion created by someone else. The Real King Arthur is a man. He can't be my mother. Heavenspan Black Tortoise seemed to hate his mother's tears, so he began to curse at himself. Forget it, your mother is already dead. This contract is going to have its final binding effect. Your father is going to die soon, and you are going to die as well. I will recover my true self in your corpse. Heavenspan Black Tortoise roared excitedly as tears flowed down his face. This roar lasted for about 10 minutes. It was quite a long time, so long that Heavenspan Black Tortoise obediently shut his mouth. Chapter 1602. What's going on? Why aren't you dead yet? Why am I not dead yet? Tongtian looked at Gu-Han, who was still sitting quietly on the chair and staring blankly at the pool of black water in his arms. That's not right. The effect of the eternal brush should be triggered immediately. Once Mother dies, you and I will die immediately. Why are you still here? Why aren't you dead yet? Tongtian pointed at Gu-Han's nose and asked. However, Gu-Han didn't give Tongtian any answer and continued to stare blankly at the pool of black water in his arms. On the other side, Black Tortoise Tongtian quickly grabbed the crucial contract and was horrified to find that Artoria's name on the contract was quickly fading away. All the names related to Artoria were also quickly fading away. From this, it could be seen that Artoria was indeed dead. Otherwise, the words on the contract written by the everlasting brush would not disappear. Only after the person related to the words died would the words disappear completely. This also meant that the everlasting brush was indeed playing its role. But if that was the case, why wasn't Gu-Han dead? Why was he still alive? Tongtian Black Tortoise was about to go crazy. Everything had been so detailed and perfect. Gu-Han had clearly written his name under this familial attack, but why wasn't he dead? Why was he still alive? Could it be that his 1,000 years of hard work was going to vanish into thin air at this moment? You didn't sign this. You didn't sign it yourself this time, did you? After going crazy, Tongtian began to create his own answer to the question, and the first answer he created was naturally the most likely one. That was, the name on the contract wasn't signed by Guhan himself, but by someone else. That was why the contract didn't play its final role. I wrote it in front of you this time. Could someone else have signed it on my behalf? Facing this question, Guhan finally broke his silence. Instead, he raised his head and responded faintly. You can graft someone else's hand onto yours like you did before. That way, it won't count as your own handwriting. Perhaps because the memory of the last time he plotted against Guhan was too deep, Tongtian was successfully trained by Guhan to go astray. He began to doubt this dark grafting method. What a joke. You and I are both sages. What in this world can deceive our eyes? You're not the seriously injured you from before. Can't you tell if this is my own hand or not? Or are you a fake sage? Guhan raised his right hand as if to let Tongtian take a closer look. In fact, Tongtian knew that Guhan definitely didn't use any grafting method this time. That was indeed Guhan's own hand, and the signature was written by Guhan himself. But in this way, the problem returned to the original track. What trick did Guhan use to finally deceive this contract and make it not take effect? Am I the eternal world brush? After racking his brains, Tongtian began to suspect that the omniscient brush in his hand was fake. This guy had just confirmed that the omniscient brush was the real deal from the disappearance of Artoria's name, and that the contract was written by the omniscient brush in one stroke. The reason is actually very simple. That is, you got the most important thing wrong. Guhan finally got tired of watching Tongtian's performance. He silently stood up from the chair and easily took the contract from Tongtian's hand. After glancing at it indifferently, he casually threw the contract on the ground. What did I get wrong? I didn't do it. I've checked the logic of this contract countless times. There can't be any mistake in logic, Tongtian said with great confidence. The key to the logic of this contract is that I am Jiyu Xuanwu's father and Artoria is Jiyu Xuanwu's mother. Only in this way can the logic of this contract be valid. Otherwise, this contract is just a piece of waste paper, Guhan said. What's wrong with this logic? Are you not my father? You're not my biological father. Heavenly Black Tortoise's expression was like that of a classic primetime family drama. In such dramas, there would always be a child who was neither your father nor mine, and at this time, Jiyu Xuanwu had the same expression as the actors in the dramas. If this was really the case, then the part of Tongtian's personality that belonged to Jiyu Xuanwu would probably collapse. No. You are my biological daughter. You will always be Daddy's most beloved daughter, and also Daddy's first daughter. Guhan gently stroked Tongtian's head and said lovingly, although you will make mistakes and be taken away by bad people, you are indeed Daddy's biological daughter. Daddy will always be your father. Great. That was great. Daddy. I am your daughter. I will only be your daughter. Tongtian threw himself into Guhan's arms and rubbed against Guhan's chest. At this moment, Jiyu Xuanwu's personality was clearly the dominant one in Tongtian's mind. Wait a minute. If I'm your biological daughter, then Mom. Tongtian Black Tortoise suddenly realized something and raised his head, looking at Jiyu Han with a dumbfounded expression. Artoria is my wife, but she is indeed not your biological mother. Your biological mother is someone else. Guhan sighed. Fat. Tongtian, who was suppressed by Jiyu Xuanwu's personality, almost died of anger. He had schemed for 1,000 years, but the beginning was a huge mistake. He really could not die in peace. Who is it? Who is my biological mother? Father, hurry up and tell me, who is my biological mother? Black Tortoise Tongtian grabbed Jiyu Han's collar and shook him hard. Although Tongtian Black Tortoise was a combination of two personalities, he was still a person. Tongtian Black Tortoise was also eager to know the truth of the matter and who his biological mother was. Come. Daddy will tell you secretly. Jiyu Han hugged Tongtian Black Tortoise in his arms and moved his mouth to her ear. At the same time, Tongtian Black Tortoise revealed an expression of anticipation. Her entire body and mind were focused on her ear, and she couldn't wait to know who her biological mother was. Your biological mother is Yi Qingping. Guhan finally revealed the true identity of that person. Ah! Tong Tian screamed instinctively, his emotions surging to the extreme. Then, 12 rays of light shot out from the dimensional space at the same time. 12 streaks of golden blood streaked across the sky. Tongtian Black Tortoise stared in disbelief at the 12 swords that pierced through his limbs, internal organs, neck, and temples. Among them were 5 friends that he was very familiar with, and there were also newcomers that he was not familiar with. Father! Why? Don't you love your daughter anymore? The Black Tortoise struggled to turn his head. As he asked, he allowed his golden blood to flow out and splatter all over Mount Huagua. Chapter 1603. I love you. Don't worry, Dad will definitely save you. Looking at his daughter who was soaked in golden blood, or rather, Tongtian Black Tortoise, Ji Yuhan said lovingly before reaching out to grab Tongtian Black Tortoise's right hand. No. No. Heavenspan Black Tortoise seemed to understand what Ji Yuhan wanted to do. He immediately grabbed tightly with one hand, trying to avoid Ji Yuhan's hand. At the same time, she kept exerting her power, trying to open her dimensional space so that she could send the things in her hand back. However, what made Heavenspan Black Tortoise in disbelief was that no matter how hard he tried to open the dimensional gate, the dimension did not give him any response. It was as if he had lost control of the dimension. This was simply inconceivable for Heavenspan Black Tortoise. Back then, when Tongtian was sealed by the 5 sages, he used his last bit of strength to forcibly break the dimensional wall between countless subworlds and the main world and send those people from the subworlds into the main world. They became the chief culprit who had been scourging the main world for thousands of years. Yuanko. One could imagine Tongtian's mastery of dimensional power. For Tongtian, dimensional power was almost equivalent to his back garden. But now, no matter how hard he tried to communicate with the dimensional space, he couldn't open the dimensional gate. Sect leader Tongtian, you don't have to struggle anymore. I've been sitting on that cliff for 13 years. In fact, I only spent 1 day comprehending the Great Way and becoming a sage. I spent the rest of the time thinking about how to kill you, how to wipe you out of this world forever, so that I don't have to worry about you running away again. So, in these 13 years, I fused the 12 divine beings killing formation of Zhu Wu, the Jutian Star battle formation of the Heavenly Court, and your immortal slaying sword formation together to form the 12 immortal slaying sword maidens formation that was specially used to restrain you. Guhan said faintly, as long as my 12 sword maidens are in your body, you won't be able to defeat a famed swordsman, let alone communicate with dimensional power. Your power has been completely sealed by me. Guhan. You bastard. You actually sneak attacked me. You actually used feelings to deceive me. You bastard. You don't deserve to be my father. Let me go. Tongtian Black Tortoise shrieked. In her opinion, Guhan had despicably taken advantage of her desperate need to find out who her mother was, causing her to momentarily lose her guard and insert the 12 sword maidens into her body. If the 2 of them had really fought, there was no way Guhan would have been able to insert the 12 sword maidens into her body so easily and completely seal her power. I didn't ambush you. You reap what you sow. Guhan shook his head and said, if you hadn't used this contract to harm me, I wouldn't have told you about your mother at all. I would rather you never know the truth and continue living like this forever. In the end, you harmed yourself. You can't blame me for this. You. Tongtian Black Tortoise spat out a few more mouthfuls of blood. You betrayed my mother. You actually gave my mother's flesh and blood to another woman to raise. You were a bastard from the beginning, a beast, a heartless person. You don't deserve to be my father. You don't deserve it. It's not up to you to decide whether I deserve it or not. I am your father. Guhan looked deeply at Tongtian Black Tortoise and suddenly repeated, don't worry, Black Tortoise child. Daddy will definitely save you. After saying that, Guhan did not hesitate and directly grabbed Tongtian Black Tortoise's right hand. Tongtian Black Tortoise began to struggle crazily. She tried her best to clench her fist and not let Guhan take away what was in her hand. However, how could Tongtian Black Tortoise, whose power had been sealed, resist Guhan's strength? No matter how tightly she clenched her fist, It was easily pried open by Guhan, revealing an ordinary-looking black pen inside. It was the Thousand Worlds pen that could determine everything with a single stroke. At this moment, Guhan easily held it in his hand. "Child, take a look. With this pen, Daddy will definitely save you." Guhan held the Thousand Worlds pen in his hand and said deeply, "No. What do you want to do? What do you want to do with this pen? You won't succeed. You won't succeed." Tongtian Black Tortoise screamed. "I don't want to do anything. I just want to write a new contract." After Ji Han finished speaking, he took out a piece of ordinary paper from his dimensional pocket and wrote the word contract on the top of the paper with the Eternal World brush. After he wrote the word, the Eternal World brush suddenly flashed with a golden light. This ordinary piece of paper seemed to be injected with boundless spiritual energy. It was no longer an ordinary piece of paper, but a piece of paper that no matter if it was burned or submerged in water, it would still be able to withstand it. Even if it was a disaster that destroyed the world, this piece of paper wouldn't be damaged at all. It would exist forever. Therefore, sect leader Tongtian will die without a doubt. He will never exist. This was the first sentence Guhan wrote on the piece of paper. When Tongtian Black Tortoise saw Guhan write this sentence, he immediately went crazy. He raised his fist and punched Guhan's head, completely ignoring the 12 sword maidens stuck in his body. Ji Han did not resist at all, allowing the heavenly Black Tortoise's fists to land on his body. He was like a statue carved out of stone, without any resistance. But when Tongtian Black Tortoise tried to move Guhan's hand to stop him from writing, he realized that Guhan's hand was also as hard as stone. He couldn't move it at all. Just like that, under Tongtian Black Tortoise's obstruction like a madman, Guhan firmly wrote the next sentence. "Everything that belongs to Artoria, come back to life immediately and live forever." After writing this sentence, Guhan took a deep look at the puddle of black water that was still quietly piled up on the ground. His eyes were filled with nostalgia. After all, this was the first woman Guhan loved in his life. Sword Maidens Qingpin, Sword Maidens Shishui, Sword Maidens Etian, Sword Maidens Duyu, Sword Maidens Chijian, Sword Maidens Juzi, Sword Maidens Slayer, Sword Maidens Celestial Exterminator, Sword Maidens Victorious Sword, Sword Maidens Slayer, Sword Maidens Shenyuan, Sword Maidens Trapping. Be it as a man or as a sword, do as your heart desires. You will no longer be trapped by others. You will enjoy eternal freedom and will not be enslaved by others. After writing these two sentences, the 12 sword maidens that were stuck in Tongtian Black Tortoise's body suddenly began to make sword cries. Although they were still in sword form, they also saw what Guhan wrote on the paper. But they didn't know that the cries of the sword maidens were not the cries of joy and excitement. Instead, they were cries of grief. Chapter 1604. All of the sword maidens are poor, sword maidens passing water, sword maidens leaning heaven, sword maidens Duyu, sword maidens starting point, sword maidens orange, sword maidens slaying immortal, sword maidens ending immortal, sword maidens victorious, sword maidens slaying immortal, sword maidens Shenyuan, sword maidens trapping immortal. Be it as a person or as a sword, they will follow their heart's wishes. They will no longer be trapped by others, and will enjoy eternal freedom. They will not be enslaved by others. Although this sentence was written in a semi-classical style, almost everyone in Huaxia could understand what was written in this sentence. If this sentence could really be fulfilled, then from now on, all of Guhan's sword maidens would no longer be bound by the sword-bearers. They would no longer have to follow the sword-bearers' orders, and could live freely like real humans. This sentence was Guhan giving his sword maidens freedom. From now on, no one could become the sword-bearers of these sword maidens. These sword maidens were him, and they would only live and fight for him. This sounded wonderful, but it also meant that Guhan would lose all of his sword maidens, and he would lose his identity as a sword-bearer. From then on, he would return to being a normal human. Although Guhan might still have the realm of a sage, as a sword-bearer, Guhan would definitely no longer exist. Perhaps he would even lose the realm of a sage. After all, no matter how high one's realm was, without the support of power, it would only be a castle in the air and would definitely collapse. However, these 3 sentences were not the end. Guhan continued to write a fourth sentence on the contract: Yuan Ku shall return to its origin, and humans shall return to harmony. From now on, destruction shall no longer exist, and Yuan Ku shall no longer exist, and peace shall last for all eternity. After writing the fourth sentence, Guhan finally let out a long sigh of relief. At the same time, he put down the Thousand Worlds brush and stared at the 4 sentences in a daze. This sentence was actually all of Guhan's hopes and the dream that Guhan had been pursuing his entire life. However, on the other side, after seeing the 4 conditions written by Guhan on the contract, Tongtian Black Tortoise suddenly gave up on attacking Guhan. Instead, he laughed and scolded, "Ha ha ha. I thought I, Tongtian Black Tortoise, was the greediest guy in the world. Now, it seems that you, Guhan, are the most shameless and greedy person in the world. Ha ha ha. So what if I'm greedy?" Guhan calmly looked at the black tortoise and readily admitted, "Perhaps you're right, I'm indeed the greediest person in the world. However, if greed could be used on the right path, on justice, then what harm was there in being greedy? I have a clear conscience. What a good I have no regrets." Tongtian Black Tortoise spat out blood as he sneered, "However, there's one thing you don't know. Although the Thousand Worlds brush can indeed fulfill everything in the world, it's not impossible to fulfill these 4 conditions of yours. However, the Thousand Worlds brush is also a greedy fellow. This contract will never make a losing deal. If you want to fulfill these 4 conditions, you must pay a price that surpasses these 4 conditions. Each of these 4 conditions of yours is earth-shattering and earth-shattering. In order to fulfill any of these 4 conditions, you must pay a huge price. I want to see what price you're willing to pay to fulfill this contract." Tongtian Black Tortoise yelled. "Of course, I know that. I will pay a sufficient price." Guhan stared deeply at the contract in his hand, then wrote down the price of his comeback: "I'm willing to pay the price of the Sage Realm. From now on, there will be no more sages in the world. Guhan will never be a sage." "What? You're actually willing to give up your Sage Realm? You're a madman." Tongtian Black Tortoise let out a scream that was even louder and more shocked than before when he saw Guhan write down the price. Sages were the peak of all cultivators. They were existences that everyone had to look up to. Since ancient times, countless people had paid the price for the word sage. Whether it was their conscience or their friends, as long as they could become a sage, even if they had to abandon their wives and children, or sacrifice all living beings in the world, they would not hesitate. However, even after paying such a price, since ancient times, there had only been 8 sages, including the newly minted sage Guhan. Even supreme figures like the Eastern Emperor Tai, the 12 Zhu Wu, and Fushi Shenming were forever stuck at this last step, unable to become a sage for the rest of their lives. It was this extremely revered position that countless people were willing to give up everything for. Yet, Jiyu Han had easily written it down on the contract in exchange for his 4 conditions. At this moment, Heavenly Black Tortoise couldn't help but retract the word greed that he had just said. Using the word greedy to describe Guhan was indeed an insult to Guhan. Guhan did not deserve the word greedy. However, when he thought of this, Tongtian Black Tortoise's heart immediately tightened. Because the price that Jiyu Han had paid was indeed huge. Even Tongtian of the Black Tortoise wasn't sure if this kind of price could be exchanged for the 4 contracts. Jiyu Han didn't have the final say in this, nor did Tongtian of the Black Tortoise. Only the Thousand Worlds brush in Jiyu Han's hands had the final say. At the same time, after writing down those conditions, Guhan let out a long sigh and was about to sign his name at the bottom right corner of the contract without any hesitation. As long as his name was signed, the contract would officially take effect. All the conditions in the contract would immediately be fulfilled, and the entire world would change drastically. As long as Guhan's name appeared on the contract, even Guhan's hands couldn't help but tremble. At this moment, even Jiyu Han's hands couldn't help but tremble. However, he still pressed the world brush against the contract without any hesitation. "Why can't I write anything?" However, when Guhan was about to sign, the eternal world brush seemed to have run out of ink. No matter how hard Guhan tried, he couldn't even write a black dot. "Ha ha ha. The conditions aren't enough. The conditions aren't enough. Your conditions aren't enough." The Eternal World Brush doesn't agree to this deal. Ha 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 ha, your conditions aren't enough. The Eternal World Brush doesn't agree to this deal. Tongtian Black Tortoise suddenly started screaming excitedly, singing and dancing as if it was the new year. This also revealed the reason why Guhan couldn't sign. From the Eternal World Brush's point of view, Guhan's conditions couldn't be compared to the 4 conditions that Guhan had written down. Therefore, Guhan couldn't sign his name on the contract. Looks like I can only increase the price. Guhan couldn't help but frown. The solution to this problem was very simple, and that was to increase the price that he had to pay. However, what made Guhan a little hesitant was that even the price of the Sage Realm wasn't enough to make a deal with the Eternal World Brush, so what else could he write down? Chapter 1605. Guhan wanted to increase the possibility of this contract being passed by increasing the price he had to pay. However, after thinking about it carefully, Guhan found that there was really nothing he could increase the price. It was not that Guhan could not increase the price, but there was no price that was similar to the Sage Realm, or a price that was 1 or 2 levels lower. This was because compared to the Sage Realm, the other prices were far from enough. Even if this price was written down, it would probably not change the result. For example, a contract involving $1 billion could not be signed because the amount of the contract was not enough. At this time, if he only added $10,000 or $100,000 or even $10 million to the contract, it would not be able to promote the success of the contract, and it would not be noticed by the other party. At the very least, he would need to add about $100 million, and it might even move the other party. Now, the price of the Sage Realm that Guhan had to pay was $1 billion, but Guhan could not find a price that was equivalent to $100 million. Forget it. The future generations have their own blessings. I don't have to think so much for the future generations. In the end, Guhan still could not find a suitable price that he could pay. He could only give up on increasing the price to reach the contract, and delete one of the conditions in the contract. What Guhan deleted was the 4th condition: Yuan Ku will return to its origin, and mankind will return to harmony. From then on, Yuan Ku will no longer exist, and peace will be eternal. This was originally a condition written by Guhan to let mankind return to the normal path of life before the Great Apocalypse. Now, Guhan could only delete this condition. In other words, in the future, Yuan Ku would still be active in this world, and there would still be endless disputes with the humans of this world. In order to achieve the goal of humans staying away from Yuan Ku, Guhan could only hope that the future generations could achieve this goal. When Guhan lost the Sage Realm and all the Sword Ladies, it was obviously impossible to achieve this great goal. No. 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 Seeing Ji Han remove the 4th condition from the contract, Black Tortoise Tongtian unconsciously began to scream. Her heart was abnormally terrified. If the contract was fulfilled just like that, she would really have to leave this world forever, so she let out a scream of terror. But Guhan ignored her screams. Guhan took out another piece of paper and wrote the previous 3 conditions and the price he had to pay. Finally, he tried to sign for the 2nd time. Black Tortoise Tongtian also stared at the pen in Guhan's hand with his eyes wide open, muttering silently, "I can't succeed. I can't succeed. I can't succeed." Perhaps it was because of the Black Tortoise's chant, but just like before, Guhan's Eternal World Brush was unable to sign the name. Evidently, the Everlasting World Brush felt that the price Guhan had paid was not enough to complete the contract. Ha ha ha. Guhan, give up. I'm so powerful. You and I are both sages. If you want to kill a sage, you must pay the price of another sage's life. You actually want to pay the price of the Sage Realm in order to completely kill me. Stop dreaming. Unless you are willing to pay the price with your life, you can forget about achieving the 1st condition, not to mention the 2nd and 3rd conditions that are even more delusional. Seeing Ji Han fail once again, Tongtian Black Tortoise laughed maniacally. At the same time, he constantly ridiculed Ji Han. You're saying that if I want to kill you, I must pay the price of a sage's life. Hearing Black Tortoise Tongtian's words, Guhan asked indifferently. Of course, but you should give up. There is no 3rd sage in this world apart from you and me. Don't even think about exchanging another sage's life for mine. Don't even think about it. Black Tortoise Tongtian said with a smile. Why do I need 3 sages? Isn't 2 enough? Guhan said expressionlessly. What do you mean by this? Are you joking? Could it be that you want to? Could it be that you? Tongtian was completely shocked. She had already understood the meaning behind Ji Yuhan's words. Ji Yuhan actually wanted to use his life to exchange for Tongtian's life. Didn't Guhan know how precious life was? Moreover, it was not the life of an ordinary person. It was not the life of a lowly mortal. It was the life of a sage. Guhan actually wanted to exchange a sage's life for his own. This Guhan was really crazy. As a sage who had lived for tens of millions of years, Tongtian was not tired of living. On the contrary, the more he lived, the more he wanted to live. He didn't want to leave this world at all. He wanted to live forever. But Guhan, who was obviously a supreme existence like him, didn't even want his own life. He was simply crazy. You're crazy. Black Tortoise Tongtian said. I'm really crazy. Guhan nodded. Then, he took out the 3rd piece of paper and rewrote the conditions according to the previous steps. He just wanted to exchange the condition of his sage realm for his own life. I, Guhan, am willing to no longer exist in this world. There will no longer be a Guhan in this world. Crazy. You're crazy. Even if you want to die, don't take me with you. Don't take me with you. Black Tortoise Tongtian screamed again. Guhan signed his name again without hesitation. However, Guhan thought that he could exchange his life for Tongtian's life. As a result, Guhan was disappointed again. Even if he used his life as the condition, Guhan still could not sign his name. His 3rd attempt also failed. After seeing Guhan's failure, Black Tortoise Tongtian learned his lesson this time. Although there was a secretly happy expression on his face, he no longer dared to ridicule Guhan. He obediently shut his mouth and did not say a word. This was to prevent Guhan from adding any more conditions that would kill him. What made Black Tortoise Tongtian feel a little relieved was that after the 3rd failure, Guhan did not try to add or subtract any more conditions. Instead, he sat quietly in front of the table and looked at the contract in his hand. Obviously, Guhan now did not know how to add more conditions. Guhan had already risked his life, but the contract was still not fulfilled. Guhan really did not know what conditions to add. Was there anything more precious than his life? Of course, it was not entirely impossible for Guhan to fulfill this contract. The biggest reason why Guhan failed the 3rd time was that he could only exchange one life for another. The price he paid could only fulfill the 1st condition. It was impossible to fulfill the 2nd and 3rd conditions. If he deleted these 2 conditions in exchange for Tongtian's life, it would be very easy to fulfill this condition. However, in this way, Artoria would still have to die, and his own sword mistress would become someone else's sword mistress in the future. This was a scene that Guhan did not want to see no matter what. None of these 3 conditions can be omitted, Guhan said in his heart. Chapter 1606. Guhan, why don't we make a deal? Seeing that Guhan was stuck in a stalemate, Tongtian Black Tortoise took a deep breath and said, It's impossible to fulfill these 3 conditions with your life alone. Why don't you change the 1st condition so that you can fulfill your contract? How do I change it? Guhan asked faintly. How about you banish me for eternity? Tongtian Black Tortoise gritted his teeth and said, Just like how I banished Kanzu in the past, you can banish me for eternity in a dimensional space, never to step into the origin world. This way, you can achieve your goal. I will no longer be able to cause any interference in the origin world, nor will I be able to do anything. This way, you can realize your dream without paying too much of a price. You can even save your life. You only need to pay the price of the Sage Realm. What do you think? This does sound like a good idea. Guhan nodded thoughtfully. Tongtian Black Tortoise's face was also filled with joy. Finally, he could not die. But I refuse. In the next second, Tongtian Black Tortoise fell into despair. Why? I'm already banishing myself. Why do you still refuse me? Tongtian Black Tortoise shouted. I don't like you, can I? Guhan said faintly. Tongtian Black Tortoise was so angry that he started to vomit blood again. Tongtian Black Tortoise didn't even know how to refute such a reason. No, thank you for your reminder. I know how to change it. Guhan's next words made Tongtian Black Tortoise's heart jump to his throat again. What new price did Guhan think of this time? What price does he have to pay? Heavenly Black Tortoise pondered curiously. She thought that Guhan had found a new price, but in the end, Guhan took out a new piece of paper. But this time, Guhan didn't write 3 conditions, but only 2. The condition that her sword mistress would be free forever was not written by Guhan again. So you gave up on one of the conditions. But don't even think about it. Unless you remove the second condition, this contract will not be valid. Tongtian Black Tortoise knew that no matter what he did, Guhan would not let him go. He no longer put on an act and began to ridicule Yi Zichen again. Forget it, Heavenspan Black Tortoise had also thought it through. Since Guhan was willing to exchange his life for hers, then it was not a bad deal to exchange a life for a life. However, this Guhan would not be able to fulfill the other conditions. His beloved daughter would also die with him forever, and no one would be able to live. Guhan's sword mistress would also not be able to obtain eternal freedom. Just as Heavenspan Black Tortoise was shouting in his heart, Guhan began to write down the price he had to pay on the contract. But what made Heavenspan Black Tortoise's eyes widen was that Guhan did not stop after writing down the first price. Instead, he began to write down the second price. This guy really thought of a new price. Heavenspan Black Tortoise was shocked. His eyes were glued to the tip of Guhan's pen. He was curious to know what other price Guhan could think of that was comparable to his life. All of Sword Mistress Qingpin, Sword Mistress Shishue, Sword Mistress Etian, Sword Mistress Duyu, Sword Mistress Chijian, Sword Mistress Juzi, Sword Mistress Slayer, Sword Mistress Juxian, Sword Mistress Victory Sword, Sword Mistress Slayer, Sword Mistress Shenyuan, and Sword Mistress Trapping Immortal. I abandon them forever, and sever my Sword Mistress form. I give up my body as a sword, and will never be able to fight for humans again. Guhan wrote down the conditions on the price. But why did the price look so familiar? There's actually such a thing. Heavenspan Black Tortoise was completely stunned. This Guhan wasn't paying a new price. He was just adding the second condition that he had just deleted into the price. Although these 2 sentences were written in different words, if one were to carefully study the meaning, one would find that these 2 sentences were actually exactly the same. However, the former was Guhan's wish that his sword mistresses would never be enslaved by others, and could obtain true freedom. The latter was Guhan's willingness to give up his sword mistresses forever. At the same time, he also gave up their sword forms, so that they could never become sword mistresses of other humans. Damn it, it sounded like the former was about obtaining something, and the latter was about giving up something, but in fact, it was the same. These sword mistresses would forever live as humans in the future, and they could also obtain eternal freedom. China's civilization was just that broad and profound. Just a few words changed the meaning completely. The benefits that he obtained suddenly became the price that he had to pay. This was simply too ingenious. You won't succeed. You're lying. You're lying to the world brush. You won't succeed. The world brush will definitely see through your deception. Heavenspan Black Tortoise screamed. Right now, he could only hope that the world brush had enough intelligence to see through Guhan's word games. Unfortunately, the world brush was only a rigid scale. When the weight was shifted from one end of the scale to the other, the scale's position couldn't be avoided. Therefore, this time, Guhan wasn't obstructed at all. He easily signed his name on the contract. The contract was established. Following the establishment of the contract, the first thing that changed was the puddle of black water on the ground. A light blue flower suddenly grew out of the puddle of black water, and it grew at an extremely fast speed. Soon, it grew bigger and bigger until it became a huge flower the size of a table. When the flower grew to its largest size, the entire flower uncontrollably bloomed. A naked girl curled up in the flower like a beautiful stamen, quietly sleeping there, as if waiting for the prince to kiss her awake. This was naturally Artoria, who had been reborn. At the same time, The 12 sword mistresses that were stabbed into heaven-span black tortoise's body flew out of his body. They transformed into their respective sword mistresses in the air and landed on the ground. I can't go back. I really can't change back. Wah! Yi Tian burst into tears. She tried her best to transform back into her sword form, but no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't transform back into the heavenspan sword. Sword mark. My sword mark is gone. I can't feel master anymore. Master. Master. Juzi suddenly threw herself into Guhan's arms in a panic. The sword mark that had existed in her body for an unknown amount of time had disappeared without a trace. She desperately threw herself into Guhan's arms, trying to feel Guhan's purple palace and Guhan's temperature. But at that moment, she realized that Guhan's body temperature was gradually disappearing. He seemed to have lost all his strength as he weakly fell to the ground, looking at her with hazy eyes. You. Everyone. Can I still look at you all? Guhan said weakly to all his sword mistresses. The 12 sword mistresses immediately surrounded Guhan. Qingpin lay in Guhan's arms, where the infant pouch was previously. Shishui looked at Guhan quietly. There was no joy or sorrow in her eyes, but tears had already covered her entire face. Yi Tian held onto Guhan's hand, unwilling to let go. Du Yu had already cried so much that she didn't even look human. She kept shouting, "Big brother! Big brother! Don't go! Big brother!" Chidian was silent. She couldn't even cry anymore. She looked like a dead person. On the other hand, Juzi pressed her face against her frigid purple palace. She was still looking for the sword mark that belonged to her. Zhu Xian placed Guhan's head on his thigh. Juexian, the sword mistress with the most fiery temper, had lost the courage to even look at Guhan. Lu Xian and Trapping Xian quietly tidied up Guhan's clothes. Victory Sword sat there in a daze. Shen Yuan kissed Guhan's lips without caring about anything else. She murmured, "How can you die? I still have enough kisses. I still haven't practiced the Japanese 42 styles on you. How can you die? It's great to be able to meet all of you. I definitely won't forget all of you. I definitely won't." Ji Yuhan looked like he was looking at the sword maidens of all his true loves. Finally, he hugged the poor girl in his arms tightly, and the last trace of spiritual energy was completely severed. "Father. Father. Your daughter is unfilial. Your daughter is unfilial. It is your daughter who harmed you. It is your daughter who harmed you. Father, please see your daughter one more time. I beg you, please see your daughter one more time." At the very end, it was Jiyu Xuanwu's sorrowful cries. Guhan, our main character, was dead. Chapter 1607. Am I not dead? When Ji Yuhan slowly opened his eyes, he found himself surrounded by a foul stench. There was the stench of rotting fruits, the stench of cat feces and dog urine, and some other indescribable smells. In short, Ji Yuhan felt like he was in the middle of a garbage dump. In fact, after Guhan carefully observed his surroundings, he found that he was indeed in a garbage dump. He didn't know who threw him into the stinky garbage dump, and his body was covered with all kinds of stinky garbage. When Guhan climbed out of the garbage dump and walked to the street outside, the pedestrians around him avoided Guhan as if they had seen a ghost. Is this the era before the Great Apocalypse? Guhan only took a few glances at this world, and found that it was exactly the same as the world he saw in the illusion of the immortal extinguishing sword. There were tall buildings everywhere, and there were old cars flying everywhere. Guhan had indeed returned to the era before the Great Apocalypse. This time is. When Guhan walked to the entrance of a supermarket, through the electronic clock hanging on the supermarket, Guhan's pupils instantly constricted into a small dot. This was because at this moment, Guhan found that today was the day of the Great Apocalypse. According to historical records, in another hour, the Great Apocalypse would happen. Is this the real world? Or is this another illusion? Guhan pondered in his heart. At first, he thought that this was an illusion he saw after he died. However, Guhan soon found that his sage realm was still there. Although he didn't have the sword lady with him, he still had the power of a sage. He could transcend the vision of this world and observe the whole world. At the same time, This sage realm also clearly told Guhan that this was not an illusion at all, but a real world that existed. It was even the main world that Guhan was in before. At the same time, the city that Guhan was in was the city where everything began, which was Wuhan City. At this moment, Guhan was in Wuhan City. If this is Wuhan City, then the starting point should be here. Ji Yuhan's heart moved, and he directly opened the void gate. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared from the street, and most of the people around him turned a deaf ear to him. Only one or two curious children on the street saw this scene, and they pulled their parents' hands in surprise, saying that a beggar disappeared into thin air. Of course, their parents just smiled and comforted them, saying that their eyes were playing tricks on them. Finally, they bought some delicious food for their children. Thus, the strange story of a beggar disappearing into thin air completely disappeared from everyone's sight. At the same time, in the Hebei Province Museum's most important exhibition hall, the Bronze Hall, next to the display platform of the Yu King Gojian sword, under everyone's watchful eyes, a void door opened, and the stinky beggar Ji Yuhan directly turned into a void door and walked out. Ghost. There's a ghost. The surrounding tourists were shocked. The timid ones directly escaped from the exhibition hall, while the brave ones quietly hid behind some exhibition booths. They secretly stretched out a pair of eyes, wanting to see what this beggar who suddenly appeared was going to do. This is the starting point. This is my starting point. No, this is not my starting point. This is no longer my starting point. This is the King of Yu. Guhan originally wanted to say that this was his Chijian sword, but after thinking about it, he swallowed this sentence. This sword was not Guhan's Chijian sword, but the King of Yu's Gojian sword. Guhan had never owned this sword from beginning to end. Bang! Guhan directly punched the bulletproof glass that could resist bullets, directly smashing a big hole in the extremely hard glass. He reached out his hand and took out the King of Yu's Gojian sword from the hole. As expected, it's not my sword. Looking at the familiar and strange sword in his hand, Guhan let out a long sigh. At the beginning of his life as a swordsman, this sword was his goal. Unexpectedly, at the last moment, this sword was still not his sword. This was probably the interesting part of life. Where's the madman? Where's the madman? At this time, the museum's security rushed over. They held electric batons in their hands and carefully surrounded Guhan from all directions. They were ready to send this madman who attempted to steal the King of Yu's Gojian sword to the police station. Let me use your King of Yu's Gojian sword. Guhan cupped his fists at the security guards. Before the security guards could react, Guhan directly opened the void gate and disappeared without a trace, leaving behind the dumbfounded security guards. Previously, some tourists had reported that the madman walked out of the void gate, and the security guards had thought that the tourists had gone crazy. It was not until they saw this scene with their own eyes that they had to believe that this world really had superpowers. The next moment, Guhan's figure suddenly appeared in a dimensional space. At this time, in front of Guhan, an unprecedented battle that would decide the fate of the entire origin world was ongoing. The enemy that Guhan was most familiar with was surrounded by 4 men and 1 woman. There were also 4 extremely sharp swords helping the 4 men and 1 woman to attack together. However, the man who was surrounded resisted all the attacks by himself. Instead, he killed the people surrounding him and forced them to retreat. His strength was simply heaven-defying. This is sect leader Tongtian. His opponents are Taishang Laojun, Prime Val Lord of Heaven, Saint Jieyin, Daoist Kundi, and Goddess Nua. Guhan recognized the 6 people one by one. Guhan directly arrived at the battlefield that would decide the fate of the entire origin world. At this time, the battle was still at its most intense. The 5 sages were still launching fatal attacks against sect leader Tongtian. With sect leader Tongtian's defeat and death, the entire apocalypse era would begin. Guhan instinctively wanted to go and help. The reason why he wanted to take the Gojian sword King of Yu was actually to join the battle against sect leader Tongtian. He wanted to use his own strength to prevent the apocalypse from happening and eliminate the tragedy of the apocalypse from the root. However, when Guhan was about to make a move, he suddenly stopped. Guhan was not afraid that he could not defeat sect leader Tongtian. In fact, Guhan was very confident that with the help of the 5 sages, he would definitely be able to kill sect leader Tongtian. However, what would happen after he killed sect leader Tongtian? Would the great apocalypse not come? If the great calamity didn't come, wouldn't the sword ladies be born? And if the sword ladies weren't born, wouldn't his future poverty, and everything that he knew in the future be wiped out? Thinking of this, Guhan hesitated. He suddenly did not know whether he should make a move or not. He just watched the battle quietly while thinking about what decision he should make. The 6 sages, who were fighting at a white-hot level, did not know that there was a 7th sage watching from the side. They were already fighting so hard that their brains were almost fried. In their eyes, they only had one thing in mind: killing each other. They did not notice the existence of others at all. Just as Guhan had expected, the situation of the 5 sages was getting worse and worse. Sect leader Tongtian was really too powerful. Goddess Enviwa, the weakest among the 5 sages, was already seriously injured. Sect leader Tongtian also realized this and began to focus his attacks on Goddess Enviwa. Soon, Goddess Enviwa could not hold on any longer. In front of Guhan, she was completely killed by sect leader Tongtian. With the death of Goddess Enviwa, the suppression of the 5 sages came to an end. Sect leader Tongtian killed Taoist Kundi and honored Lord of the Origin one after another. Only 2 sages were left. Sect leader Tongtian already had a hideous smile on his face, while Taishang Laojun and Jirin Taoist looked extremely desperate. Guhan finally understood. How can I let you win? Guhan gritted his teeth and said. Then, he pulled out his Yu King Gojian sword without hesitation and injected all the strength in his body into it. Under Guhan's great strength, the sword no longer existed and turned into a sword light that looked like a ray of light. Go! Guhan shot out the sword light. Sect leader Tongtian was caught off guard and was pierced by the sword light. After looking at Guhan in disbelief, his body exploded into pieces. However, sect leader Tongtian's primordial spirit was not injured. Instead, it quickly escaped from the explosion, ready to escape and find a place to resurrect and fight again. Don't even think about it. Guhan stretched out a hand from his hiding place and grabbed sect leader Tongtian's primordial spirit, completely controlling it. At the same time, Taishang Laojun and Jirin Taoist also arrived beside Guhan and looked at Guhan vigilantly. They had no idea who this guy who suddenly appeared was and when there was a 7th sage in the world. Greetings, masters. Both Taishang Laojun and Jirin Taoist were nominal masters of Guhan, so when they appeared, Guhan bowed to them without hesitation. When did we accept you as a disciple? Taishang Laojun and Jirin Taoist asked curiously. There is an agreement in the unseen world. Masters, you don't have to ask anymore. Guhan did not want to explain too much. He was not interested. He just placed sect leader Tongtian's primordial spirit in front of Taishang Laojun and Jirin Taoist and asked, Masters, do you have a way to destroy this primordial spirit? I'm afraid it's impossible. Taishang Laojun and Jirin Taoist shook their heads with a bitter smile. Our bodies are greatly damaged, and our primordial spirits are almost in a state of collapse. I'm afraid the 2 of us are unable to destroy sect leader Tongtian's primordial spirit. However, since you have been watching from the sidelines for so long and your strength is at its peak, if you are willing to sacrifice your cultivation, you can definitely destroy sect leader Tongtian's primordial spirit. In this way, the world can be at peace forever. What do you think? Sacrifice my entire life's cultivation? Guhan lowered his head and pondered. In fact, there was no need for Taishang Laojun and Jirin Taoist to say anything. Guhan knew that he could completely destroy sect leader Tongtian's primordial spirit as long as he was willing to use his strength. He no longer had to worry about the remaining fragments of sect leader Tongtian's consciousness spreading to various places in the dimensional space and opening the dimensional wall between the dimensional space and the main world, causing the great apocalypse. Guhan did not care about his strength. He was willing to sacrifice his life to kill sect leader Tongtian. It was not a big deal for Guhan to sacrifice his life again. However, if that was the case, history would be completely changed. There would be no more great apocalypse, no more sword lady, and no more people and stories that he was familiar with in the future. What should he do? All right, I'll do it. After hesitating for a while, Guhan finally nodded. He then picked up the King of Yu Gojian's sword that had turned into light and slashed at sect leader Tongqian's primordial spirit with all his strength. His primordial spirit let out a horrifying shriek, then exploded like a bomb. Sparks flew in all directions, leaving only a black crystal in Ji Yuhan's hand. It had lost all of its luster. Ji Yuhan's eyes widened, but he did not say anything. Instead, he looked at Ji Yuhan and said, "That's right." Oh no. The fragments of Grandmaster Tongqian's consciousness that exploded just now have already attached themselves to the dimension wall. That lunatic plans to take revenge on us. He plans to destroy the dimension wall and completely destroy the entire origin world. Taishang Laojun suddenly said in horror. I'm sorry. I've just become a sage and I can't control my strength yet. I've done something bad. Guhan said to Taishang Laojun and Daoist Jieyin in shame. No. It's not your fault. Even we can't completely destroy sect leader Tongqian's primordial spirit. You've done very well. Actually, these scattered fragments of consciousness are not a big deal. They are just a disease. The key is this black crystal. It's the source of sect leader Tongqian. If we don't destroy it, sect leader Tongqian will definitely be reborn, Taishang Laojun said worriedly. All right, Daoist Taishang. Back then, it was our selfishness in the investiture of the God's War that led to this evil result. My junior brother is already gone, and I no longer have any desire to live in this world. Let me sacrifice the last of my strength to seal this evil creature. All right. But I'm afraid your strength alone won't be enough. Moreover, someone needs to preside over the seal after it's formed. Count me in. Taishang Laojun nodded. The two of them had already decided to sacrifice themselves to seal sect leader Tongqian. In the end, they said to Ji Yuhan, "Little friend, although the two of us do not know where you came from, since you are willing to be our teacher, can you help us with a small matter?" What favor? Guhan asked. Little friend, you might not know this. Once the dimensional wall opens, countless people from the outside world will definitely enter the main world. I'm afraid the main world will be destroyed. And those gods and Buddhas of mine have long been contaminated by sect leader Tongqian's consciousness fragments. Instead, they have become his helpers. However, when Heavenly Sovereign Fuxi forged the Shenyuan sword, he said that someone injected pure and flawless consciousness fragments into more than 10,000 longswords that he forged. These long swords have gone through the baptism of countless years and all of them have become full of spirituality. With just a little bit of transformation, they can transform into humans and fight against those who want to invade the other world. At the same time, they are also the last barrier that the main world can rely on. This is a transformation method researched by Heavenly Sovereign Fuxi. This transformation method has already been used on the 4 immortal execution swords. The 4 immortal execution swords have indeed become human-like creatures. However, the spiritual power required by the 4 immortal execution swords is too strong. In order to transform the 4 immortal execution swords, Heavenly Sovereign Fuxi has already exhausted all of his strength. He left with a smile on his face. Now, only you, who is in the sage realm, can enlighten those sword maidens one by one and let them borrow the power of humans to fight. This can be considered as making a final contribution to the human world. After Taishang Laojun finished speaking, he handed the transformation method researched by Heavenly Sovereign Fuxi to Guhan. Then, he looked at Saint Jieyin and smiled at each other. He took the black crystal in Guhan's hand and his body became illusory at the same time. Finally, the three of them merged together and formed a black whirlpool. This whirlpool was like a mosquito coil. It spiraled together from the beginning to the end, becoming a never-ending passageway that could only go in circles. This was obviously the seamless corridor. I'm sorry. Guhan looked at the seamless corridor formed by Taishang Laojun and Saint Jieyin who sacrificed themselves and said in his heart. As for why Guhan said sorry, only Guhan himself knew. Has the apocalypse already begun? When Guhan once again returned to the main world, it was already a bloody world. Countless Yuan Ku had killed their way out of the dimensional rift and carried out a cruel massacre on humans. These are all sins that I have committed. Ji Han watched on helplessly as countless creatures died, but his heart was filled with guilt, but his footsteps became abnormally firm. He once again returned to the museum, and found the glass cabinet that he had broken. Come back. Gu Han clenched his hand in the void, and the Yu King Gojian sword that had melted into light returned to Gu Han's hand. Under Gu Han's control, the Yu King Gojian sword gradually changed from light to its original form. I'm sorry. I've used you too much. I'm afraid your spirituality will be greatly damaged. However, due to the overuse just now, the Yu King Gojian sword's spirituality had been greatly damaged. In Gu Han's opinion, the Yu King Gojian sword would probably lose many of the memories that it had accumulated in its long life. Fine, this is your fate. Gu Han suddenly recalled the Yu King Gojian sword that he had encountered at the beginning, who had no combat power and did not know any sword techniques. He suddenly understood something and did not dwell on it. Under the control of Saint Ji Han, the Yu King's Gojian sword quickly returned to its original form. However, to everyone's surprise, other than the Yu King's Gojian sword, there was also a fist-sized rock that appeared with the Yu King's Gojian sword. This is the crystallization of my power. Gu Han immediately understood the origin of this stone. Previously, Gu Han had poured all his power into the Yu King Gojian sword, but not all of it had been used up. Instead, a large portion had been gathered in the Yu King Gojian sword's body. In the end, as the Yu King Gojian sword returned to its original form, the excess power also appeared in the form of a crystallized stone. This looks exactly the same as the creation divine deity. Gu Han looked at the crystallized stone formed from the power of a saint and smiled bitterly again. Then, he casually tossed this extremely precious stone into the distance. As for where he tossed it and whose hands it would end up in, Gu Han could not care less. In any case, it would end up in his hands in the future. In the end, Gu Han lightly tapped on the Yu King Gojian sword that had returned to its original form. Following the method created by Fushi, he lit up the Yu King Gojian sword's spirituality and truly opened up a new future for the Yu King Gojian sword. Then, he placed it back into the glass case and even restored the broken glass case to its original form. Finally, he secretly hid in the void and waited quietly. 3 days later, a boy and a girl entered the museum just as described in history and found the Yu King Gojian sword. Sigh. I wish you happiness, my children. Gu Han did not show himself. He only looked at his daughter and said quietly. In the following time, Gu Han traveled the entire world. He did not help anyone. He only had one goal, and that was to use his consciousness fragments to sense all the swords that could become sword maidens. This included the Sword of Victory, the Juzi sword, the Duyu sword, the Shenyuan sword, and so on. Gu Han could not help but stop when he saw these swords, wanting to use them for his own sword maidens. But in the end, Gu Han heartlessly left. When Gu Han finished all this, he left the main world and began to build a peaceful small city in a dimension near the main world. He stayed in this small city and quietly watched the changes in the world. He watched as his son-in-law and daughter saved the world, and he also watched as his son-in-law and daughter turned against each other. In the end, he allowed his son-in-law to be exiled to another dimension, and did not help at all. When a Jendi, who had fought for humanity for many years, was about to die, Gu Han stretched out his hand and turned into a huge ray of light in the sky. He took the Jendi to his side and placed them in this small city so that they could break free from the restraints of time and live forever in this dimensional city. Every Jendi had such a fate. They had actually ascended to heaven, and the city that Gu Han built was the legendary Immortal Realm. 200 years later, an awe-inspiring woman who was invincible in the world and had set up many backup plans for a young man in the future, was on the verge of death. Only then did he make a move and take this woman, who had been powerful her entire life, to his side. Husband. Qing'e really saw you. Qing'e really met you in another world. Qing'e is really too happy. Yi Qing suddenly threw herself into Gu Han's arms and wantonly cried in pain. All right. We will be together, we can be together forever. Gu Han gently stroked Yi Qing's back and said. Hundreds of years passed. After that, Guhan did not interfere with anyone. He just let the whole world continue to change like this. It was only when Guhan's parents died that Guhan could not help but save their souls. When he turned 18 and was about to leave the city to fight, he took his parents back to his side, but he left his sister's soul behind. After a few decades, Guhan personally witnessed the destruction of the Seamless Corridor. He stepped into the Seamless Corridor. Only then did Guhan take out a stopwatch and silently count the time. When he reached the number in his heart, he disappeared from this small city with Yi Qing. He entered the Flower Fruit Mountain, just in time to see Guhan close his eyes. "Make way, I'm coming to save him." Seeing the countless sword maidens he had missed for 1,000 years surrounding him and crying, Guhan finally could not help but burst out with emotions. He walked out with tears streaming down his face, slowly but firmly pushing the sword maidens away. "Guhan, why are you here?" "This is..." The sword maidens were shocked by Guhan's appearance. They looked at the living Guhan, then at the dead Guhan on the ground. They did not know how to react. "Grandpa, your main body cannot stay here. If you delay for a few more seconds, your main body will really die." Flowing Maple suddenly appeared in the Flower Fruit Mountain and said to Guhan, "I understand." Guhan nodded. Then, according to his plan, he opened a door and sent the seemingly dead Guhan through the door. As long as he left this world, Guhan would be able to live. "All right, Mummy, this world is finally at peace. I'm going to bring you to find Daddy. He stayed in that world for 1,000 years, thinking about you every day. He missed you so much that he almost turned into a starship." Flowing Time Maple suddenly appeared by Jiyu Xuanwu's side and said something strange to Jiyu Xuanwu. He then looked at Jiyu Han and asked, "Grandfather, you don't mind if I bring my mother to reunite with my father, right? 20 years. After 20 years, both your daddy and mummy must come back. I'm still waiting for my 80th birthday." Guhan laughed. End of book. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.